Doctor Who is emotionally dramatic again.
Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Goose, Doctor Goose, Doctor Goose, Duck, Bombadil, 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 Tom, Tom, Tom.
Characters. 14's dilemma is to investigate the alien threat, yet avoid Donna. Problem is the alien is in Donna's house. Donna's dilemma is to get back what she lost, yet it will kill her. The problem is a direct reminder has shown up and he can't keep away. Shirley's dilemma is to get the doctor's information, but not let him take over. Sylvia's dilemma is to keep her family safe, yet aliens show up in her house. Meep's dilemma is to get home, but is being hunted. Rose's dilemma is to be accepted, yet her greatest secret is being blocked by mother and grandmother. Sean, Fudge, and the other aliens are passive support. They don't necessarily have a dilemma, but they serve a good role as allies and enemies. 14 is given the interesting dilemma of not being able to interact with Donna, yet the world around him, the new face, running into Donna, her daughter Rose, keeps trying to pull him back into the past. So there's already a core tension there. Then Sylvia and Shirley push and pull. While Sylvia is desperate to keep the Doctor out of Donna's life, Shirley draws him in. Both know the Doctor at a time where he's working in the shadows to avoid Donna. But while Sylvia is terrified the Doctor will return, a tense family dynamic, Shirley is almost investigating him to find out what he knows. She has a smooth business relationship with him. The Meep versus Rose. Plot versus theme. While the Meep is the center of the plot, Rose is the heart of it. Both feeling like alien outsiders. While the Star Beast is putting up a front to hide their true intentions, Rose is comfortable in herself and the key to stopping the Meep. Sean and Fudge, secondary allies. Sean Temple is a strange case. In character role, he still makes sense. He's the casual glue that softens the family during tension and chaos. He's the only character without a clear dilemma. And while not every character needs one, he's so flippantly indifferent that I almost get Dan vibes, where I'm not sure he knows what's going on. A stranger claims to know Donna, he doesn't question it. An alien shows up to his house, he doesn't question it. The guy he spoke to doesn't remember the lie he gave, he doesn't question it. His wife and daughter suddenly have magic powers, he doesn't question it. And then his wife goes off with the guy who lied to his face, and he doesn't question it. Maybe he's that casual, but he does freak out when Donna runs off with the Doctor in the middle of danger, so he understands danger. It's just that little extra mile of, you'd be surprised at least a little, wouldn't you? Like, he's too calm for me personally to understand. He does say that's the great love story, mate. Me putting up with that, clarifying why Sean shrugs things off. He's the calm in the storm and brings a balance to all the drama around him. He's the Norm Peterson of Cheers. He's the Michelangelo of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Fudge is absolutely a bit part, but feels like a real person in the few minutes they get. He kicks the plot off telling Rose about the escape pod, and then demonstrates that the aliens hunting the Meep are willing to spare children. Outside his two-scene role, he's a kid who acts like a real kid. He's not just walking exposition, he has opinions and excitement and investment in life around him. This is actually how most of the characters function. Their roles create so much double duty, but their personalities really pop. Relationships. You have Doctor and Donna as old friends. You have Donna and Rose as mother and daughter. You have Donna and Sylvia as awareness versus denial. You have Doctor and Sean as mutual acquaintances. You have Sean and family as casual and chaos. You have Rose and the Meep as outsiders. You have the Doctor and Meep as alien survivors. You have Shirley and the Doctor as ally status battles. You have Doctor and Sylvia as adventure versus safety. You have Sylvia and Shirley as acceptance versus discourage when it comes to how they treat the Doctor. The key is that it plays and explores and develops these relationships, using the Star Beast twist to throw a spanner in. Doctor and Donna are old friends who don't recognize each other. Their tension comes from Tennant enjoying time with Donna way too much, while also being wary that every interaction could be the last one. While there's a clear escalation of Donna having flashes of recognition when she hears he has two hearts or holds the Sonic, or refers to Tennant like he's a separate person and not in the room, culminating in she called him Doctor, and then the two of them letting Dr. Donna back into the room. Donna and Rose are a loving mother and daughter. They're fully supportive and yet still feels that sense of distance, which represents the abstract feeling Donna lost. Donna and Sylvia are awareness and denial. So Sylvia is trying so desperately to prevent Donna from even thinking about aliens, and the longing on Donna's face contrasted with the panic on Sylvia's just makes for a good dynamic. You have Doctor and Sean as mutual acquaintances. Knowing as much as the Doctor does about Donna, he has an easy in. While the Doctor wants information out of it, he is genuinely interested in what's happening with Donna's family and is getting to know her husband. Sean and family is the casual among the chaos. While it makes Sean a little bit oblivious to me, he fits into the family quite well, and as a friend pointed out, he's the reason Rose isn't as highly strung as Donna. Rose and the Meep as outsiders bonding. Rose and the Meep have a heart-to-heart, and the Meep doesn't just get revealed as evil. They take a cruel shot at Rose by saying, "And your weird child," to Donna. If you're watching carefully, the Meep is saying, "Be my friend," and as a friend pointed out, the Meep is smart enough to know the toys are immobile. It sees friends as things to be owned and refers to Rose in kind. The Meep manipulates Rose by saying, "Poor little things with no voice," or "The Meep is all alone," to which Rose then says, "Sometimes I think I'm from a different planet." The Meep tries to spin this and say, "Well, you sound lonely." Rose says, "No, just different." And the Meep ignores this and goes, "Now you have the Meep," as if it's responding to the loneliness. The Doctor and the Meep as alien survivors. Interestingly, the Meep isn't just characterized as the last of its kind, but the Meep claims to have two hearts. Given what the Meep also said to Rose in terms of "be my friend," only to take it back when the Meep switched, I don't actually buy this, and I think the Meep was telling everyone what they wanted to hear. Shirley and Doctor, competing leaders with mutual respect. They have a status battle dynamic when they try to poke at each other, but they do that from a place of, "I'm in charge, but I appreciate your input." It's a business relationship where they see eye to eye on the detective side, but have a light rivalry when it comes to who gets jurisdiction. Doctor and Sylvia, as adventure versus safety. As Sylvia clearly took the Doctor's advice to tell Donna once in a while that she's proud of her, as shown in when Donna is beating herself up and Sylvia says, "You had a breakdown, sweetheart, but then you got better." It's coming from a place of denial, but she's clearly concerned about Donna and is doing her best to reassure her. Donna desperately wants the adventure back and is drawn to the Doctor, but Sylvia seems to wholeheartedly blame the Doctor, especially when an alien shows up after 15 years, and then the Doctor shows up right after. So when the Doctor is equally drawn to Donna, platonically flirting at the wall when Donna is impressed, Sylvia treats the Donna like a threat. Sylvia and Shirley as acceptance versus denial. They don't even share a screen together, but my friend pointed out how they're serving opposite roles. Both of them are the only people who recognize the Doctor on face alone, and the Doctor is initially trying to keep his distance from the situation. Sylvia desperately wants Tennant to butt out, go away, while Shirley desperately wants his information to solve the alien crisis. Neither gets what they want from the Doctor, as he doesn't know what's going on and can't stay away from Donna. Plot. So the opening hook, Tennant can never see Donna again. So who does he instantly run into? The inciting incident. Spaceship crashes, meaning that avoiding Donna is now going to be extremely difficult. First turning point. It all comes to a head. Donna sees the unignorable alien. Doctor shows up. Sylvia desperately tries to deny it. Doctor says, "Here we go again," and this seems to be Sean's attitude as well. Midpoint. The Doctor lets the Meep have a go, and the Meep kills everybody. Last turning point. Donna remembers and joins 14 to help. Crisis. Tennant has to sacrifice Donna. Climax. Rose inherited the meta crisis, and so Donna and Rose are both actualized. Closing hook. Tennant and Donna get lost anywhere in time and space. Promise, progression, and payoff. 10 asks why this face at the beginning, again during the Shirley Tennant conversation, and then again during the crisis with Donna. While Donna gives the explanation of "to say goodbye," it's interesting that Donna refreshes the question later and specifically says there has to be an answer. Rose casually mentions a bag full of eyes, and it just seems like an everyday thing, but then the eyes are for the toys, and the toys are a foreshadowing of the Rose's metacrisis. Rose mentions to the Meep that she feels like she's from another planet, also foreshadowing the metacrisis. Rose almost shakes the Doctor's hand, foreshadowing what might have happened given it was Donna touching Doctor's hand that caused the metacrisis in the first place. Putting them in two halves of a room made of glass was cruel. A mirror to Tennant's end with Wilf. Subtle joke with the psychic paperback Grand Mistress, but then he confirms later, "Then I had a bow tie, then I was a Scotsman, then I was a woman," as a lead-in explanation for his new face, looking like his old one, and what that means going forward, which then concludes in "why this face to say goodbye." Donna's slow drip feed of memory, and then Sylvia pointing out she called him the Doctor after they avoided the title the entire time. It was also a clever way to reintroduce the concept to new audiences, as they could reveal two hearts in the Doctor and the Time Lord as separate pieces of information. She called him Doctor. The drip feed is usually a way to stall narrative progression, but here it's layered tension. It's not teasing a mystery, it's teasing a consequence. So Sylvia starts by being outraged the Doctor showed up, but ends by saying, "My father would be proud, I have no higher compliment." The Doctor says one last trip and everyone knows what that means. It never is. But then Donna says to Rose, "You can't come on the TARDIS, something will go wrong." Then she says, "I lost my job spilling coffee on the computer." The TARDIS just happens to have a coffee machine, and then Donna yells, "Oh my god, I've done it again." Donna says, "I will burn the world for you, darling." It's a bit telegraphed, but Donna willing to die for her daughter is solid. So inevitably, Donna ends up saying Donna Noble is ascending. Donna Noble saying, "Why this face to say goodbye?" It's a bit meta, but it's the same line of thinking as Capaldi saying, I have this face to remind me that I'm the Doctor, or to remind me that I save people. Whether you know the twist in advance or not, the alien sparing the boy to hunt the Meep is already consistent with their eventual behaviour. Character motivation should be solid even in hindsight. Shirley can't go upstairs because she's in a chair, doesn't get mind controlled, and is then there to save the Doctor from the soldiers with knockout darts from that very same chair. The Doctor says, I won't be the one who killed her. I figured this was an obvious, then he does, but it turns out he doesn't. It's still foreshadowing. The mind control soldiers for me gave the game away. I knew the Meep was evil from the get-go, but one side of the alien spares a child, and the other mind controlled them. I don't think it's intended to be subtle, I think it's intended to be suspenseful. No matter how early or late you figure it out, there's a self-gaslighting in how cute and helpless the Meep is. The soldiers aren't dead, plus the car isn't damaged, aliens are good. Arguably there isn't a reason for Tennant to think the Meep is straight up murderous, but the two soldiers inform him exactly that. Setting: green screen land. One of my biggest complaints with the Chibnall era was the heavy amount of green screen. Now sure, this was 2020 and there were a lot of behind the scene reasons for all the abstract locations and frequent character teleporting, but that's why my second biggest complaint is how wooden the dialogue was, how even without the green screen, characters tended to stand around and deliver lines. Now David Tennant and Catherine Tate do a naturally good job at delivering dialogue with some angst, but the abstract nature of the environment and the direct-to-camera nature of the heavy dialogue, it just reminds me of the same problem. It's a terrible setting for what is already a cardinal sin of exposition, and while monologues are perfectly fine, I think of how Capaldi did the opening speech in the Bootstrap Paradox. He's walking around the TARDIS, he picks up a bust of Beethoven, has arm movements, something. He plays guitar just to accent the story. Characters standing in a void delivering an exposition dump almost always smacks of last-minute post-production hole patching. It's a necessary previously on for new viewers, but surely if this was always the plan, there were better ways to frame it. The town. Something Davies always did really well at was making worlds feel lived in. 14 pops out and enjoys his surroundings. The last time I felt like this was thin ice during season 10, mostly because a lot of other places are human actors in alien places, so it didn't feel like it exists much beyond the page or beyond the set, and the Chibnall era characters felt like either one-dimensional cardboard cutouts or caricatures like Jack Robinson. Just letting the organically excitable Doctor walk through slice of life town, seeing people go about their day, gives it an air of authenticity, while genuine people having genuine real reactions to concrete tangible surroundings. And strangely I think that's why Eat My Salad from season 11 is actually one of my favourite Chibnall moments. I can tangibly feel the salad hitting the villain and it's still completely inconsequential. In contrast, all I can think of is the amount of green screen heavy teleporting scenes throughout Flux that prevented even the locations themselves feeling tangible along, let alone the people in it. There is just something about Tennant being excited to be in a regular city, visiting middle-class, real dramatic situations. Starting with the town gives the whole thing a grounding. The house. The house shows the strength of commonplace environments with everyday conflicts, in contrast to the sci-fi and magical elements of a show like Doctor Who. When everything is aliens and strangeness, it starts to feel fake. But here we see an ordinary, rickety house in contrast with the towering, shiny ship. The house begins as a suburban ground for grounded family dynamics, but when two alien factions invade it, we get to see just how the houses are shaped and connected as they have to escape through a brick wall. Using your environment doesn't just give the action a place to occur, it gives the characters things to work with as they escape. It's hard to escape a white room with a clean shot. It's impossible to run away from a group of Sontarans by running directly down an empty street, but using the battle itself to have time to generate a shield, using the sonic to destabilize a brick wall in order to create an escape hatch, these are all ways a simple house can turn an ordinary conversation or an ordinary invasion moment into an engaging challenge. The ship exists to disrupt the town, and the house is the human element of that town. Since the Meep is really the only one to use the interior of the ship, it's not doing much as an environment, but it is a towering threat over suburbia that no one knows how to deal with. Townsfolk film it crashing, unit explores it only to get mind controlled, the unit scientist Shirley can't go up to help investigate, so it creates some logistical challenges, and while the Meep's escape pod landing exactly where Rose is going to get her phone is probably the biggest coincidence of the story, it's the ship damage and the Meep's fleeing from it that initially gives it a benefit of the doubt. Even if a random person finds the Meep, discovers that the soldiers are mind controlled, they would never have a need to link the two, at least until the Doctor has reason to believe the aliens hunting it aren't aren't a threat the way the Meep claims they are. The hints are there, but it's harder to put it together if the Meep wasn't at the scene of the crime. One could argue she subconsciously had Dr. Donna telling her where to go, the same way it told Donna to give the money away, but the Doctor also went in the wrong direction towards the ship instead of the escape pod, so it feels like cheating to assume Rose had ascended wisdom from the get-go. The shed. The TARDIS is a home and a ship. It disguises itself as a police box, which was an everyday object when Doctor Who began, and cleverly, the shed functions in the same way. It initially appears to be nothing but a shed, Rose's safe place as the TARDIS is to the Doctor. But what should have tipped us off metaphorically is that the Meep completely blends in with that shed. Yes, because Rose made toys echoing the Doctor's adventures, foreshadowing the mental link between all three of them if the mental blocks would lift, but also because the TARDIS is an alien ship. It should then not be a surprise that the TARDIS, the Meep ship, and Donna's house are all damaged. The shed is the only remaining safe place, because while Donna, Tennant, Sylvia, the Meep are all putting on a false face to survive, and are actively swept up in adventures, Rose lives by her true face, and her home truly blends in. She's created a truly safe home for alien life, and is held back from her true power not because of her own denial, but because of her mothers and grandmothers. She knows full well what she is, both in everyday transness, and in the plot's version of non-binary Dr. Rose. But she inherited Donna's power. She also inherited Donna's mental blocks. When Donna's denial lifts, the final step in Rose's transformation is complete. The shed, as a metaphorical TARDIS, safe haven for aliens, an extension of the house, is the key foreshadowing to Donna and Rose's potential to unlock the Doctor within both of them. Somehow, again like Season 3, Davies managed to take an ordinary shed and imply that being a Time Lord is akin to being a god. Sean's Taxi. Sean's Taxi to me seems like, kind of like Sean's character himself, is a bit of a loose setting. It's not a big setting, it's not a major setting, but it is casual, like Sean. A social job where Sean meets strangers and drives them around. And the way it gives 14 an enclosed, isolated room to have a private, gossipy conversation with Sean to catch up on Donna, a person 14 otherwise can't ask directly, it allows the dynamic sort of akin to a barman or a therapist. It's a personal container, a place where meeting strangers is normalized. So 14 getting in his car doesn't come off as invasive, and having a conversation has the same necessity as when 10 shut down all the digital screens in midnight, and then remarked, I guess we'll have to talk to each other. The taxi, of course, also in literal terms, demonstrates hints that Donna didn't keep her winnings, that her husband is doing a lower class wage job where tips are normalized, and it shows off that Sean doesn't mind. He's happy to talk to 14, he's happy to drive people around, he's content, and he doesn't sound at all bitter that what Donna did put him in this position, even if he does phrase it as putting up with all of that. 14's hiding place. The way it's lit, we can see a long road to the ship on one side, and a spot of cluttered darkness on the other where 14 is tucked into. It almost looks like 14 has been thrown away. He's out of commission to an extent. He's still working, his screwdriver screen contrasts the darkness with light, but it allows for a scene in which Shirley seeks him out. It emphasizes the Doctor Who premise elements of the show for new viewers. He's hiding because his new face is recognizable, but this allows Shirley to find him. It is then a great environmental catalyst for a discussion around why he's tucked away, why he's taking a backseat. It emphasizes how Shirley comes to him for his advice. While he has some information, he's expressing to her how he doesn't understand the old face, or why the TARDIS sent him to Donna with said face, and Shirley realizes that 14 has no plan. Shirley, to be a bit pretentious, becomes his light. She comes to him to understand why he is in the shadow, and inadvertently gives him the piece of information he needs to seek out the Meep himself. The glass room. Clearly built to mirror the Dr. Wilf situation, the recognizability gives it a sense of stakes and anticipation. Donna has snuck in with him and seems to recognize the Doctor. This is inevitably where Donna will suffer the same fate she suffered in Season 4, mirroring 10's fate in Season 4. Same software, different case. But not one to repeat the same beat verbatim, Davies changes the setting from 2 small containers where only one can leave, one sacrificing themselves for the other, for a large room with a lot of buttons, where actually what the Doctor needs more than anything is 2 doctors. Designing a room where there are multiple options, millions of buttons, all shutting down due to the Meep's plan, splitting in 2 so he can't even get to the other side, and his loyal friend is a shell of her former self, unable to help as fast as the alien can do. It is a room literally designed to give 14 every hope that he can fix it on his own, only to take it away and give him no option but to unlock Dr. Donna. It is a room designed around crisis level tension. The TARDIS. Initially I was a bit thrown by it. The TARDIS as an environment is used for such variety of scenes that it often has to be generalized environment. Also, much like the Doctor's face, it so often changes it invites comparison and personal preference. Personally, I found 12's TARDIS so dynamic and 13's TARDIS so cluttered that on first impression I liked how spacious and clear it was, yet also felt like it didn't lend to the dynamic story assistance that 12's TARDIS did, mostly because this TARDIS feels a little sterile and unlived in. That said, I was a lot more hopeful once the lights kicked in. I love that it's all ramps and I demand Shirley gets a day in the TARDIS at least, and I assume that the TARDIS will be filled with like Brum Reward style as costumes or knickknacks or rooms are collected over time. It's a really smooth baseline setting. Dramatization, organic banter. I really loved the scene where they said, too good for us now? Evening, Doctor. That's a double-bladed dagger drive damaged by laser fire, which means we've got two sets of visitors at war with each other. Nice to meet you. I mean, compare this with Kate when she says, I like this regeneration. I hope I see it again. Gaps. Tennant helping out until he realizes it's Donna. Donna missing the obvious lab plane crash while everyone else sees it. Tennant using old information about Donna that is now outdated to get info out of Sean. Donna saying it's not my fault I lost my job. Alright, it is my fault, but still. Doctor says if Destiny arrives, it's heading for Donna Noble. Shirley asks what for. He says, I don't know. And Shirley says, oh. Is a really subtle way of showing that Shirley assumes the Doctor knows what's going on. She had a genuine reaction of surprise. The line, that spaceship didn't crash, it's parked, feels like a classic Moffat line that we thought it did the obvious thing, but it actually did an unusual thing. The Doctor saying, sealed. What does that mean? Oh, I can do it by hand. I can still do it with half a room. No matter how he tries to fix the ship, something gets in the way. Subtle escalation. Donna hearing the Doctor has two hearts. The moment of recognition when she touches the Sonic, calling him the Doctor, saying I could help just felt like the sort of thing he would do. She doesn't just magically flip from one state to the other. The transgender discussion is actually built into the plot. There's the dead naming Jason, Sylvia's awkwardness, Rose saying you're assuming he is a pronoun. True, yes, sorry, good point. And then I take all the gender story elements as growing pains. It's inevitably going to be a little clunky as even characters like Tennant have to learn how to recode their own bias. Like just as Donna was explaining to Sylvia, who despite meaning well stumbles over misgendering because of past tense, present tense. At the end of the day, it's good to see David Tennant in real life being so pro-trans, and then his character instantly accepting that he made an assumption that was completely unfair and gender biased. Like, didn't question it, didn't argue or defend, but wasn't above making the mistake either. Exposition. The usual way the show gets across its premise is the Doctor says, I'm an alien, and then the companion says, what does that mean? And then the Doctor rifles off a bunch of, it means I come from Gallifrey and I can time travel and I got two hearts, and it's all a bit, I'm new here, please explain territory. Here, the Doctor has organic reasons to drip feed information. He shares the two hearts thing only because the Meep claims it has two hearts. Probably a lie. And then, while Donna is asking the usual ignorant questions, it's framed entirely as Donna being organically lost and Sylvia trying to cover it up. The Doctor only brings up regeneration the first time because the psychic paper makes a mistake that says Grand Mistress, oh, catch up. And then the second time because Unit has gotten confused between 10 and 14. Not once does someone just not understand and Tennant goes into a speech on the audience's behalf. Except the info dumps at the start and at the climax. Once to set up a previously on and another to explain the payoff. Both of these are kind of clunky as a result. Trouble is they need the monologue for people who don't know the context behind what this story is responding to. Even then, new viewers won't get the Rose reference, which is pretty significant to why Tennant is acting the way he is. And even then, I've watched it 3 times and I'm still not sure what they meant by just let it go. And it's annoying that the show's explanation for that seems to be you won't understand it because you're a man. Transitions. When Donna is regenerating, having said, I would burn for you, darling, it cuts to the Meep saying, now burn! Emotional impact. Heartbreak. The moment where Sylvia says, you didn't see anything, do you? Which is a subtle checkup. She changes the subject when Donna starts talking about spaceships. Just the look on Sylvia's face, a mix of pure and pity. Longing. The moment where Donna tells Tennant he could visit with her family. He's been given a second chance, you can do things differently. And his response is just, yeah. Maybe? Yeah. And I get the sense that for one reason or another he's thinking, yeah, that can't happen. Funny. When Donna yells, that's how I lost my job, spilled coffee on the coffee machine, then what could go wrong? Oh my god, I did it again. My friend floated the idea that Donna did it on purpose, and the TARDIS installed a coffee machine purely to hint, nudge her to do it. Everyone walking past a sleepy guy. especially the Meep's hesitation back when it looked like a purely innocent thing. I appreciate with all the E.T. references in the story's frame that Donna refers to it as Paddington. Dread. When the Doctor yells, "Last minute evidence, me!" The moment where the Doctor makes a whole show out of the court case, thoroughly proves that the Meep is dangerous, and then gives it a fair go by walking out of the fire line when the Doctor says either we've escaped or we've got things very wrong. The moment where the Doctor has to activate Dr. Donna. At the moment where Donna and Doctor have a moment of triumph bouncing off each other, and then Donna randomly says, "How long have I got to live?" And there's a moment of pause. Best 55 seconds of my life. Sad. The Doctor told them they couldn't fire until he said so, and then he determined that the Meep was probably psychotic. So he moves out of the fire line and says, "Let's be fair, the Meep, how do you respond?" And then Sergeant Zogroff and the Constable die. It's a little annoying that 14 didn't see that coming, but I think it's meant to be sad that 14 was still willing to give everyone a chance. Then the Meep takes full advantage of that in the cruelest way possible. The moment where Sergeant Zogroff says, "Sergeant Zogroff regrets retirement. I blame the Doctor for their deaths. The Meep cheated. I blame the Meep too. But the Doctor had every reason to wholeheartedly believe what they were saying, and he didn't stand in the way. He made a mistake and it cost them their lives." Scary. The Meep's face change got me. I knew the shift in character was coming, but I was not anticipating the teeth. Engagement. Tennant is just so good at explaining exposition or repeating plot beats. When he says "mum" and a bag of eyes, like he's personally invested in it. Then the crossed legs give him such a sense of both confidence and casualness. He seems like he's simultaneously passive and in control at the same time. He's an inherently engaging character. While the Doctor took a shot at the plan, I find it interesting that the Doctor didn't have a plan and wouldn't have a solution until Shirley gave him the idea. The Doctor doesn't need to be all-powerful and clever. The Doctor just needs to be active, brave, and willing to look for a solution. Look at the way Capaldi handles the mummy, or Tennant physically begs for the Meep to spare them from information. They're just intensely invested. Angry. The Meep shooting the two casual British aliens. When the Meep said, "You stupid woman, you weird child," that was too far. Character. When Donna said, "I gave away my money," Chibnall was so keen to make characters all one-dimensional magic school bus morality that everyone became boring. Donna isn't a bad person, but a realization that she gave away money because she was emulating him and didn't know why, and now with her memories back can see what was motivating her. Her moment of horror in the face of destruction of London is honest. She's not wishing it back, she's just shocked. It's nuanced. When 14 says she's fine, then Sean says, "I heard she was sick." 14 says she's not fine. Sean says, "Well, it was her own fault." Then 14 says she's been fine. The court case week. Just the right amount of ridiculousness where it's silly to us, but serious to them, just before all hell breaks loose. Odd stuff. It took me 3 days to realize, but the reason the TARDIS looks so familiar is because it looks like the inside of Professor X's Cerebro thing. The lava gets reversed. Is the ship still there? The weird word association. There's the moment where 14 says, once upon a time, Lord. And I'm not sure why he repeated it other than for the word association. The moment where Donna says binary and they cut to Rose saying non-binary. Again, feels like someone went, "Hey, they're opposites," and then they worked backwards. They both kind of sound like knock-knock jokes. Clunky speeches. Tennant and Rose at the start. They're doing it so dire, which it needs, but the green screen fade-outs remind me of a parody Frasier did, where Diane made a play about Cheers, and they're like, "I pour beer down people's throats. I drink it. If she ever remembers me, she'll die." Also, given the way they tell him to just let it go at the end, it makes the beginning look extra melodramatic, not emotionally potent. When the Meep turns evil, they should have lingered on Rose's heartbreak just a little more. It should be a genuine betrayal to her to find out someone she would have befriended thinks just cruel things of her. She has a moment of offense, but I felt they could have developed that and poked at it a bit more. Miscommunications. Not their fault because it's behind the scenes meta, but Tennant thinking Wilford died was already a bit of a mean fake out before the reality that Bernard Cribbins has died. It really warps the reading of the scene. It's meant to be funny, but due to the genuine sadness behind it, all it gave me was whiplash and a cognitive dissonance. Especially when Sylvia follows up Tennant's mistake with "you idiot," and I'm like, you said he's not with us. That's what people say. Like, excuse me, that's not his fault for assuming death. That's your fault for using passed away death colloquialisms. Unexplained. What do they mean by "we choose to let it go," and what does Sean mean but not him? Have Donna and Rose let it go before? Has Sean heard about the Doctor ever before? If they have, why didn't they remember since the last time? Why do they suddenly remember now? The cliffhanger. We could end up anywhere in time and space. Felt very much like Chibnall's era. Big sweeping statements that probably go nowhere. I trust Davies will go somewhere with it, but it's just such a vague cliffhanger. Telegraphed. I could suggest a better way off this planet than a double-bladed dagger drive, because that thing is gonna... From the moment Tennant said this, I knew that was the flaw in the plan foreshadowing, and that meant the Meep was no longer a threat. When he said, I won't be the one who killed her, telegraphed, but then turns out, although he thought he had to, he wasn't. Closing thoughts. Anticipation for future. I assume the Sonic is the 60th thing. Part of me feels like it's weird the Doctor didn't have this ability until now, but then as something to show the budget off, I don't mind it. I would feel weird if it could create anything it wanted. It's going to be a challenge if issues like lava suddenly being reversed and the shame your male presenting line being this unnecessarily patronizing moment and both being common criticisms are going to be an ongoing issue if they've filmed all this with the same mindset without ever taking feedback. The TARDIS is all ramps. I demand that Shirley be in the TARDIS at some point. Missed opportunity if they don't. Wilf is with Kate, which means that Wilf won't show up until episode 3. It's the same episode that Neil Patrick Harris shows up in, and Tennant goes to unit. If Wilf doesn't show up until the end, what are the odds that Davies would let Wilf be the cause of Tennant's death again? Wait until I tell the boss. Staple of Davies to introduce an ominous character or thing that eventually comes back at the end. At its core, using we're binary but she's not because we're male and female is a bit odd when Tennant's meta-crisis was completely human and wasn't non-binary. Neither was Donna, even as Dr. Donna, and I'm torn because it makes her integral to plot and unignorable, which is good, yet implies the cause of her non-binary transness was special space magic and not real slice of life. That said, it gives the story a strong heart. Rose is an outsider who relates to the main alien. The main alien pretends to be Rose, then pretends to be the Doctor. And when the truth comes out, the Star Beast is evil, and the outsider is actually the central response to Donna and Tennant's last adventure. It may have some holes in the way its climax establishes what it's doing, but it's not in any way a deus ex machina because the TARDIS shed and the toys resembling aliens, plus her bonding with the Meep, ties it all together as an explanation for why all of the elements come together. I also took the line, finally I'm me, to mean that while everyone accepted her as female, for as long as Donna was in denial, so was her daughter. Donna finally woke up Rose, and now Rose can be her true Time Lord self. 14 has an old face, discovered a new solution to an old problem, and now can have one last trip with Donna. Although I appreciate the joke about something going wrong, which was inevitably true, it's kind of a shame that Rose couldn't go with them. Wilf is Rose's great-grandfather after all. When it's all said and done, it's nice to have nuance, fun, and emotional weight again. So much is achieved by giving characters actual personalities and opinions, and having those opinions bounce off each other through organic dialogue. Doctor Who is fun again. I really liked Sylvia in this. If you'd have asked me who my favourite character was during season 4, I would have probably said Wilf, then the Doctor, Donna, almost anybody. But if you'd have asked me who my least favourite character was, like excluding side characters like the Cactus People, I'd have probably said Sylvia just because she treated Donna so horribly. And in this, her dread at Donna's potential death outweighing even the Doctor's addiction to seeing Donna again and reliving the glory days. Like, I felt so bad for her every minute she was trying desperately to get Donna away from the situation, down to yelling in the house, "It's not real," when there is very clearly a fluffy alien in front of them. The fact that the Doctor can't go near Donna means that he starts off passive in the shadows, but David Tennant plays it really well. You can see him thinking even when he's interacting with Rose and Donna. He can't give it away, but even the way he says, "Mum," and a bag of eyes really shows that he's thinking and taking it in and emotionally invested. Like, this Doctor acts like the story matters to him. And so even when he's in the shadows, we see him go from trying to avoid the situation to investigating the wrong part of the situation to realizing he has to go into the house and then thinking he can handle it on his own, down to when everything's collapsing on him and he goes, "Well, I can do it with one hand, I can do it with half a room, I can still do it," only to realize he has to do the thing that he never wanted to do. That is a good dilemma building. Characters also have real voice in this. Like the way Shirley knows that the doctor is there and is trying to bait him into joining, like, what, too good for us? But then when he's like, oh, okay, I'll come help, she's like, no, we've got this, off you pop. Like, it's really dynamic in the way that she phrases things. Like, I feel like the previous era would have had Shirley just come in and say, oh, I think you should join us. And the doctor would say, no, thank you, you've got this handled. And she'd say, fair enough, but have you got any advice for us, Doctor? Like, it would be the characters say their intentions. Whereas they have, the way they've written Shirley, the way they've written the Doctor, the way they've written Donna, they have this very playful way of not saying what they're saying. There's just a lot of good subtext. The way the Meep is designed to look soft and cute and very Baby Yoda-esque, only for the CGI to completely shift it, like on the spot. It was like a jump scare to me. Like, it goes from, the Meep is very sad, kill every, and it just, for a character there's technically kind of only those two traits, it really pops out as a larger than life factor in an otherwise grounded story. Oh yeah, it's,
the Meep is all alone, kill everybody!
And Rose, being the center character that pulls Doctor and Donna back together, is the first one to meet the Meep and bring it in to give it a safe haven in her technical TARDIS. Rose serves a really good function to the plot, and the more I think about it, they didn't give her much to do. For a character where the entire story focuses around her, it's weird to see she doesn't have as much agency outside of I am trans, and the story is a metaphor for my actualization as being trans. That said, Sean, Fudge, even Rose, as much as they're not given as many, they do lean towards exposition just a little more than characterization. So Doctor and Donna are old friends who don't recognize each other. This means that when they catch up, it's both like two old friends being back together, being really excited, living the old days. And at the same time, there's this tension of Donna doesn't quite know what's going on. Tennant is trying to make concessions like, well, it's only if she remembers me, not if she sees me. You know, I could be in the room. Like, he can. We've seen that happen before. But he's constantly pushing it. And Donna is constantly invested and interested in this strange new man, and he seems to know something. And she feels this sense of loss that he seems to have answers for. And the Doctor can't help but be like, oh, you're impressed by that? That's great. I've missed these times. Knowing full well that it's not gonna go well. You can kind of see him more and more try to ignore that danger. And that's why I think Sylvia works really well as a middle thread between the two, going, Doctor, get out of my house. Donna, look away. Like, Sylvia is the one trying desperately to make sure the bad thing doesn't happen, whereas everyone else is getting so sucked into it. And I think that's what makes Shirley and the Doctor so dynamic. They're asking for each other's input. The Doctor is looking on his screen, he's investigating, but he's trying to keep out of it. Shirley is trying to bring him in, and at the same time she's trying to say, I'm in charge, but I respect your input. And the Doctor's trying to say, yeah, I'm staying out of it, but actually, I'll go investigate that. Oh, no, thanks, we just want to know what your plan is. Oh, I don't have one. Oh. Like, that little "oh" is a very subtle thing, but it shows so much about how Shirley sees the Doctor without her saying, oh, I thought you would have had a plan. Everything I read about you said you'd have a plan. She just reacts, and it's implied that she has this pre-assumed vision of who the Doctor is and how effective the Doctor can be, and is confused as to why the Doctor is sitting on the bench, wondering, like, what's he doing? Why isn't he helping? And so she doesn't just say, why aren't you with us? Why aren't you joining? She's like, too good for us, are you? So they've got this instant banter with each other. They're both trying to pull rank and yet showing complete respect and understanding for why the other person cares about the situation. They're on the same side. No part of it is them trying to shut the other person down. They're just trying to make sure the other person doesn't get too much leeway. Oh, what's that? Has that been playing the whole time? Oh, no. It's good to have something to chew on again. Even if in some places I can't quite savor it.
Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor, knock, knock, who, knock, knock, who, knock, knock, who is it? Sense of doom, sense of doom, sense of doom, there's monsters, imposter who, imposter who, imposter who, who's human? Monster who, monster. The monster's you and Donna too. In wild blue. Oh, it sounds better in my head than it does when I'm doing it. The key is to have fun. Background. My experience. I really wanted to analyze these episodes without having to bring up or bash on what came before. But honestly, what I love about this and am disappointed about this is kind of emphasized by what came before. So, for context, Flux comparison. Flux as a story was a mess. It was full of ingredients that never quite came together as plot or theme. Dan and Yaz literally got stuck in the past, visited a fortune teller who said, "Call your dog," which they then traveled to China to do, only for that dog to say, "I don't have time travel, so what was the point?" I get COVID restrictions, but it's hard to be forgiving of a story that stuck to its guns about being a convoluted, overarching, war-changing, ambitious attempt when it should have cut stuff, simplified, gone inward not outward, find its theme, make 6 or less bottle episodes. I have to believe it was a mess even before the restrictions, because it tries to balance Sontarans, Weeping Angels, Timeless Child, Tecteun, Time, Swarm, Azure, Vinda, Rose, the Grand Serpent, 3 Whitakers, Magic Tunnels, the Flux teleporting them to any place they need to be at any time, Diane, the Passenger, Ruth, the Division, Carvanista, Jericho, and Kate Stewart. Not including Power of the Doctor, which was the Master, Ace, Tegan, Yaz, and Dan. Why is there so much stuff? Why does it think that Ruth just showing up is the equivalent of an actual plot point? Things just exist on screen, then they go somewhere, then they die or get rescued by the Doctor. Yet somehow Power of the Doctor embraces its shallowness and is a lot of fun. It's better than Season 12's finale, which was green screen, exposition dumps, and characters standing in a void. And so despite Power of the Doctor being my favourite Whittaker story by far, it's completely empty. None of it matters, although what makes Power of the Doctor fun is that I don't think it's remotely trying to matter. It's just bombastic nonsense. That's its core, and it plays to that strength. Chibnall's Who was shallow and bombastic at best, boring at worst. Sorry if that's harsh, just giving context where I'm at. I sat through it all and it taught me that I will probably be loyal to Doctor Who no matter what it does. But if there's one thing I can safely say for the show now, I love that it's creative again and that it has good characters to back it up. Where I'm torn. Wild Blue Yonder is leagues better. Simplified, strong atmosphere, and yet I'm in two minds of it because I'm a viewer who enjoys entertainment, but I'm also an aspiring writer who enjoys digging into the weeds to see if anything is growing beneath them. Thematically, it just slips through my fingers and I can't get quite a grip on it, but atmospherically, it's very well crafted, and I've been wrestling with that, trying to explain it's good, but every time I try to explain how, I end up going, but, and then wondering how fair that is. As the episode says, humans can believe two things at once. From where we came from, it's downright perfect, but from what I know Davies and co can pull off, for such an emotionally rich relationship-testing premise, its catharsis falls short. I think it succeeds at experimenting stylistically, but at the expense of a cohesive story. It just had so much more potential than it explored, and that's not to sell it short on how hard it would be to pull off what it already did. The premise. I'm gonna quote Davies directly here. They arrive at a station and they meet evil versions of themselves. That's it. Solid. Focused. I have no issue with this. I just want to make sure I understand what the story is going for before I try to determine whether that direction was a good idea and whether it actually got there. Because to me, a good story is like a gold mine. The more you dig, the more rewarding it gets. Davies said in the same video he fears that its simplicity and secrecy might make it disappointing. I'm actually going to argue that its simplicity and secrecy were its best features. Like, not knowing what to expect made the weird and wacky on first watch more engaging. It was a full experience rather than filling in the blanks. And I don't care if it's a multi-doctor story or not. What I do care about is whether it has a cohesive heart to it, what threatens that heart, what we can emotionally and philosophically and morally and existentially take away from it. Storytelling to me is about taking something the characters care about, sticking the knife in it, and coming out the other side with a deep sense of understanding, revelation, and catharsis. Pure and fitty. Less stuff doesn't mean less depth. So two friends have drifted apart and meet twisted versions of themselves. That is a solid premise. It lends itself to intrigue, misdirection, reflecting characters back against themselves. There's so much potential here. Characters. Protagonistic force. So the Doctor's special traits are quick thinking, adventurous, peaceful until pushed, and struggles with opening up. His dilemma is that he wants to adventure with Donna like the good old days, but the real Donna is hard to identify because she's being impersonated. Donna's special traits are she's strong-willed, honest, opinionated, and struggles with a fluctuating self-image. Donna's dilemma is she wants to go home to her family, but the TARDIS has run away. And I'd like to point out that both obstacles in this instance are very well chosen. They directly get in the line of the very thing the character wants. It also means that it takes what they're good at and what they're bad at and twists it. Antagonistic force. The not things. While they're visually distinguishable on screen, they serve basically the same function. While I may refer to them as not 14 or not Donna in individual instances, I'm treating them effectively as one single obstacle. And by the way, any episode where Tennant gets to play an evil version of himself is an absolute win. This episode may be eternally rewatchable just for that. The not things special traits are reading people, mimicking them, being existentially terrifying, being adaptable, and struggle with human concepts and dimensions. Their dilemma is they want to steal 14 and Donna's identities so they can steal the TARDIS and get back home, but the captain has slowed down their progress, and human nuance is hard to replicate. Support. The TARDIS. That's right, the TARDIS is a character in this one. The TARDIS wouldn't instantly sit in people's minds as a threat or an enemy, but in this story it certainly functions as an obstacle more than an ally. The TARDIS is capable of giving warnings, flying and time travel, but struggles with direct communication and accuracy. The TARDIS's dilemma is it wants to prevent the not things from gaining access, but must steal the sonic screwdriver and abandon 14 and Donna in the middle of danger in order to do so. So this is kind of my first nitpick issue. The TARDIS's actions create a contrived inciting incident, and by extension a contrived Deus Ex Machina climax. The TARDIS is supposedly run away to avoid hostile action, and yet when it returns, the ship is blowing up and one of the aliens ends up on board anyway. So the situation is far more hostile when it returns than it would have been if it just picked up 14 and Donna straight away. So the idea that it then comes back at a time where the situation is actually most hostile just seems a bit contradictory and a bit convenient for the plot. As a sentient object, its running away is clearly just an excuse to get it out of the plot and take the Sonic with it, but its lack of clear motivation and ill-timed return makes a contrivance more evident than it needed to be. This move prioritizes the drama of the premise over the logical consistency of its characters. The TARDIS has always been built on obscure motivations, but if we have the simple sentence of, it ran away to avoid hostile action, it is bizarre that it comes back only to encounter that very hostile action. It didn't gain anything by running away. The Captain and Jimbo. Again, treating them as one entity. The Captain has sacrificed themselves and left Jimbo behind, effectively representing their dominant hand, their lingering hope, in order to get rid of the lingering threat. Jimbo's special traits are being robotic, hard to read, hard to access, and struggles with speed, which turns out to be a benefit. The Captain and Jimbo's dilemma is that they want to detonate the ship, but the Captain is dead, and Jimbo has to go about it excessively slowly in order to avoid tipping off the not things to its intentions. While the Captain and Jimbo do ultimately end up slightly more ally side, it's effectively slowing down both parties and getting in everyone's way, so it's practically neutral. Relationships. 14 versus himself. The Doctor has not dealt with the fallout of the Flux and is trying desperately to relive the glory days with an old face. When he's alone, confronted by the weight of it and a monster that might take it away from him, he loses control. Donna versus herself. Donna knows what it's like to travel with the Doctor and this time just wants to play it safe. She keeps close to the TARDIS until it's gone, and once it has, she completely panics. Only when she knows there is no alternative to get home but to get rid of the hostile action does she swap out, "Oh my god, where are we?" to "Let's go kick its ass." 14 versus Donna. Where the last episode went about establishing how Donna and Doctor were at arm's length and eventually found each other again, or as Donna put it, a second chance, this time they are physically close and hold conflicting priorities. 14 insists on taking a look around several times, while Donna insists on waiting here until the TARDIS repairs, until there's no alternative. While they keep trying to find each other, there is a lingering fear that they are talking to a mask and thus struggling to truly communicate with each other. 14 and Donna versus Captain and Jimbo. Jimbo's lack of speed and the Captain's lack of leftover evidence makes for a neat mystery to 14 and Donna, where they had no one to talk to but each other, wink wink, and are held back by the changing rooms as they try to figure out what actually happened and what they can do about it. The Not Things versus Captain and Jimbo. Building the mystery plot tension off of the Captain's slow plan is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the Captain's plan to deprive the Not Things of any strategy is a good, albeit tragic one, On the other hand, it means that 14 and Donna walking into danger are hindered from overcoming them themselves. It creates a lot of dread as the answers are locked away, but once the answers are solved, it leaves a lot of hindsight and time spent on the mystery instead of the relationships. The mystery is fine, but it's a one and done situation. The relationship between Doctor and Donna is what makes this episode unique. So, Doctor and Donna versus the Not Things. I left this one till last because this is where I'm torn. In a story about two friends who haven't seen each other in 15 years, there'd be a lot to catch up on, and yet all they really talk about is Mrs. Bean for a minute before the plot and mystery completely takes over. When the premise takes this long-lost relationship where they were once Doctor and companion in their prime, who have now developed opposing priorities in going home or going on more adventures, in a premise that traps them on a ship where two monsters can emulate, threaten, disrupt, and twist that relationship, even potentially tear it apart, devastate the trust between them, test it at its deepest, darkest core. Most of the time, the opportunities for 14 and Donna to affirm or doubt how well they know each other, and how much we can contrast as audiences who haven't seen them in 15 years, amounts to, that's not how humans work, or 14 wouldn't do that, that's not how ties work, or that's not how arms work. The not things are not overcome by affirming the Doctor and Donna's connections, nor are they twisting the knife in the conflicts and rifts forming between the Doctor and Donna. They're overcome because of their inability to emulate basic human concepts, nothing specific or special to this premise or this dynamic. For such a unique relationship, with a premise that directly reflects that relationship, this story could occur to any Doctor with any companion at any time. It does showcase Donna confessing to 14 that she knows about the flux, and this is good antagonism towards 14, but 14 ultimately has an outburst and then discovers Donna isn't real, not because Donna wouldn't antagonize him like this, but because not Donna can't hold her shape. We have not 14 getting Donna to open up about her family when he first meets her, but then he gives away that his arms are too long when Donna hadn't even noticed, and the family issue never comes up again. So there's plenty of good stuff because they have such natural chemistry, but we'll get there. Settings. Isaac Newton world. I know it's England, but it being England is quite irrelevant in narrative context. In atmosphere and tone and purpose, it's a bright, carefree bubble world where the grass is green, the sky is blue, the birds are chirping, and even the lady Isaac Newton is talking to is called Mrs. Merridew. Maybe that's a historical thing, but I find it an interesting coincidence that her name has Mary, and everything about this place is happy, happy, happy. Despite the difficulty of their situation, Doctor and Donna are stuck in a tree, laughing it off, and excited to see Isaac Newton. This is effectively the happiest place on Earth, a carefree world where even the most serious of dangers is met with a tongue-in-cheek tone. Which is odd, given the cliffhanger, given what happens 5 minutes later. I don't care what race he is, I care about scene purpose. Ship hallway. The ship hallway is long, and unfortunately due to being entirely CGI, suffers a bit from green screen voidland effect. We can tell that they can't really interact with it, but it serves its purpose. It takes a long time for them and the robot to go down it, and it shifts in order to prevent the not things from ever getting through. The best the not things can do is look through the hole, which unfortunately due to 14 and Donna's arrival, enables them to finally take shape and attempt to override controls. Also, I noticed there is actually a dark patch on the floor the moment 14 realizes there's a button to access the cart. Captain's chair. Well, we know that life form has a bum. Captain's chair. A place of exposition and information. The captain is missing. Life signs none. A good setting for an empty ship. Here they can gather all the information they can. Of course, with the captain's logs or higher command information, there is easy justification for classified information and gaps. A captain's chair can make a character feel in charge of a situation while also shutting them out from true control and authority. It also makes clear that even the owner/pilot of the ship is AWOL. There is truly no one here. The opening window also enables 14 and Donna to establish where they are heading towards and what they are lacking. The edge of the universe. I always wondered what it would look like. Although it's simply what's outside the window of the captain's ship, it is absolutely its own atmosphere. It simulates the void, the existential dread, the impossible, the improbable, the distant, the long gone. As 14 says, physically unprotected right on the edge. Ship corridors. Tight container, flickering lights, clattering floor panels, loud slamming doors. What better place for a monster chase than somewhere there is nowhere to run and every possible noise to hear a threat or a false alarm. A ship corridor puts the pressure on and gets the sensors jerking. Also, because the corridor rotates with the ship, it can be used to disorientate as the corridor walls never look the same. Captain's
funeral? I forget what they call this room. Just like the last episode, this room also has another glass wall, protecting them from the not things physically, but not from their studying eyes. With an above window for a first row seat to the captain's final decision, to the big chair that 14 can hide behind, this room does far more for providing a safe space which 14 and Donna can hide in, up until they realize they need to be elsewhere, and now they are trapped behind battling for door control, so the not things can't leave. Tennant is just so good at working a tangible room between drumming his hands on the chair, hiding behind it, looking like he needs to pee because even the not things can see him trying not to think, to 14 being able to study his own face. Plot. Hook. The TARDIS is damaged, and they can end up in anywhere in time and space. Where do they end up? Mavity. Why? So they end up in a tree with Isaac Newton, who mishears gravity as Mavity. And then they leave. When the TARDIS is so damaged it should be stuck. But then they end up literally at the edge of the universe, which is kind of where that cliffhanger was hinting at taking them to begin with. And now the TARDIS is so damaged that it's now stuck. This really is the setup, not the hook. But God, it should have been the hook, or something more directly connected to the plot. Mavity is such a waste of script. And, foreshadowing for the rest of this video, I think it cost them. I think structurally it really cost them. Inciting incident. The TARDIS runs away. Quickest way to establish 14 and Donna are stuck on a ship alone is to remove the TARDIS, remove the Sonic, and introduce the line, something so dangerous the TARDIS ran away. The lock-in, or the point of no return, or the first turning point. Basically, characters make a decision, they can't go back. 14 and Donna discover the ship is empty. No life signs, airlock opened 3 years ago. This makes sense if you see this as a dread and mystery survival story. They are investigating and they can't leave until they neutralize the hostile action, yet there is no evidence of it. They seem stuck, and establishing they are at the edge of the universe is the most lost place to be stuck. Pinch point 1. 14 and Donna encounter strange beings that can copy their face but not their shape. Just when they think the ship itself might be the problem and everything seems a bit too easy, the main threat rears its head in the most sneakiest way possible, throwing the audience out of any sense of safety. The hostile threat is them, only something is off. As a slow build story, I see why the threats aren't introduced until here, but in hindsight with this story's true potential, the not things could have struck a lot earlier and blended in a lot more and been a lot more effective for doing so. Midpoint. 14 and Donna are separated. This is a really good turning point to have. Whilst on a ship, can't even get to each other, can't escape. But again, as a story where the not thing's best weapon is impersonation, it's strange how often 14 and Donna spend together in the same room. And even when they're not, the not things don't have much to work with beyond understanding or not understanding human nature in general. It's general abstract stuff, not preying on Donna and 14's relationship. It's what makes the story feel intriguing but shallow, and I can't help but feel it would have benefited from splitting 14 and Donna up earlier. It's strange that there's no scene where they get back together but are so unsure they got it right that they end up ditching each other anyway. Or no scene where Donna and 14 alone encounter both versions of the other until the climax. For some reason, 14 and Donna aren't truly split until the midpoint, and even then, only spend a single scene apart before finding each other again. When the whole story could have got far more dread and mystery and emotional weight from keeping them apart longer or playing on how distanced they feel even while in the same room. When you're on a ship, on the edge of the universe, isolated, and isolation is where the dread is coming from, make them feel isolated, even when they're not. Pinch point 2. 14 and Donna reunite. Part of this challenge is, again, Pinch point 2 is a good place for them to reunite. By the time they reunite, they've only been pushed once by the fake version of themselves, and now the only times they've encountered fake versions have been the same scene 3 times. Donna meets not 14, then she finds the Doctor. Then she meets not 14, then she finds the Doctor. Then all 4 of them end up in the same room, and this is the only time they catch each other out based on personal information. By the time they are back together, there were so many opportunities for variety and doubt, and I have to admit the story being drawn out is a double-edged sword. It builds dread, but by stalling rather than threatening. The last chance, or the final turning point, or the renewal of hope. Basically, everything kind of comes to a head, and it's very clear we're in the final act. All 4 of them uncover the captain's plan. This is probably the best scene in the story. All of the pieces are in play. 14 and Donna are both safe and trapped. Any attempt to solve the plot gives advantage to the not things, and all of the slow build hits its peak as all the answers come flooding, especially with the tension that they're not allowed to find the answers. Only how much is the captain's plan mystery worth, despite how well they present it? At the expense of the same scene playing out pretty much the same way, only the not things can be doubly threatening by taking what appears to be a safe place for 14 and Donna and warping it by antagonizing the idea that Donna isn't safe and wishes she was home, that 14 is so busy solving it he's putting Donna at risk, and 14 and Donna need to know each other better than they know themselves in order to identify what they can and cannot trust. Only for not Donna and not 14 to know how to get to them psychologically, not just in plot mystery, but by trying to split them apart in the room. It doesn't have to work, it's just interesting they never tried it. It's odd that they raised that tension in the beginning, build a story with a self-destructive mystery, complete with doppelganger monsters that can dig at that tension, and it never comes up again. If the monsters are them, 14 and Donna's very relationship should be tested, especially when that is the only thing the not things can reach from the other side of the glass. Crisis. The not things have now caught up, pursuing the robot instead of 14 and Donna. There is a chase down the hallway. This is where it sort of shows that all the mystery and dread was vibe first, because it devolves into a purely physically threatening chase, where 14 and Donna are now trying to catch up with the not things so they can make sure the ship blows up and probably all die. Except the TARDIS returns, and that is good for 14 and Donna, yet that's exactly what the not things wanted and what the TARDIS was trying to avoid. And if not Donna and not 14 are now supposedly 99.9% the same, and yet don't capitalize on it or go after the TARDIS directly, if they get in the TARDIS, the bomb is no longer an issue. The TARDIS returning actually puts everyone in danger too early. At this point, it becomes clear that it's convoluted what the not things want, and that there wasn't much danger of the not things getting into the TARDIS, nor was there any genuine threat to 14 and Donna's relationship, despite an imposter threat that should excel at that very thing. Climax. The ship blows up, and 14 has to rescue the real Donna. It firstly seems contrived that Mrs. Bean only came up in a single scene, for a single conversation, as an excuse to give 14 something to talk about with Donna, having forgotten to do the legwork for this type of climactic decision, whereas physical threat-wise, the not Donna was better off just big-arming and brute-forcing away onto the TARDIS. And even once 14 contrivedly fails to pick up the right Donna, he contrivedly takes back his decision and proves in a hand wave that the not things really didn't have that much chance of stealing the TARDIS away to begin with, or stopping the robot, and all 14 had to do was not bother. While that in itself is an interesting challenge for 14 because he can't help himself, the story isn't built around that. The monsters aren't built around forcing the Doctor to think. That is a happy accident. The monsters are built to take Donna and 14's place, and then displace 14 and Donna as they start to question their relationship, which surprisingly they hardly ever do. Closing hook. 14 and Donna have a heart-to-heart chat about what Donna really remembers. This is good, but built off of one scene, and not like, imagine if their relationship was put through the ringer as the not things tell them stuff they don't want to hear, or things they fear the other is thinking but don't want to ask about. If the not things intend to scare them so they can read them, then there's no incentive to be honest, or hold back on cruel honesty. The scene where Not Donna wields the flux against 14 is powerful, and the whole premise could have banked on that sort of stuff. Even then, it's odd that Not Donna would be gut-punching 14 with something only privately relevant to him, and not with the numerous reasons Donna might no longer want to travel with him, or all the ways he and Donna may have grown apart. Any kind of contrast between this and all of season 4 to work with? At that point, the story may as well have just been 14 versus not 14, and having it be Donna wasn't fully explored or utilized. While challenging the idea that Donna potentially knows things about him he doesn't want to deal with, the potential that the topic could have come up any time during the plot could have been a lingering threat to 14, while the implication that 14 was prioritizing the adventure above Donna's well-being could have been a lingering threat for Donna, despite what 14 said, because while Donna believes him, the not things would be slowing down. Beginning, middle, and end. In the beginning, they encounter an empty ship and the TARDIS runs away due to an ominous, hostile threat. As far as the dread and mystery goes, it's strong, but it does mean a slow build that on a rewatch doesn't have much to it. The moment where Donna and 14 snap at each other hints at a tension growing between their opposing priorities, but then it ends up an everyday mystery adventure until they realize where they are. It is a slow-built mystery at the expense of relationship building and an opening hook that doesn't lead into either. The very notion that the not things don't show up until the second act, and they spend the first act building the sense of isolation and mystery, but not any weakness in 14 and Donna's relationship for doppelganger villains to exploit, means that even in compensation of the hook, the setup doesn't utilize its time well in the grand scheme of the story. In the middle, beings emerge from the nothing to simulate 14 and Donna and scare them so that they can study them and replace them. Here, the cosmic horror is used to full effect, but at the expense of any true challenge for the characters. Majority of the time, 14 and Donna figure out who the real one is simply because the monsters are still learning and aren't very good at what you would expect imposter villains to be good at. Time is actually padded for dread, and then the monsters arbitrarily give themselves away. In the end, 14 and Donna figure out that the ship was going to blow itself up, and 14 has to choose the right Donna to save her in the nick of time. This choice is unfortunately shallow and surprisingly unbuilt to, and probably the foundation of where I feel this episode falls short. Without that one nugget, I probably would have been like, yeah, it's a survival story. But when it hinges its ultimate climactic decision on 14's ability to identify Donna, that's when the questions started churning. That's when endings define stories, and I retroactively started questioning what it was trying to do. In order to attempt a climactic decision around 14 identifying Donna, they really needed to emphasize the identity elements and investigate their dynamic more, whereas everything leading up to this so far is more interested in the captain's plan, and the monsters are surreal beings, not doppelgangers. So, if they had just solved the captain's plan, gotten in the TARDIS, flown away, and blown the monsters up, I think I would have been far more, yeah, these monsters were a morphing physical threat that was getting better and better at taking over them or outsmarting them. Like, by becoming 14, they became as smart as 14 and were there able to take over the ship. But then focus on that. Don't make the climactic decision about 14's connection with Donna and have a fake out where Donna is about to die because 14 couldn't tell who the real one is. And instead just make it about a physical chase down a hallway where the monsters have you beat, but they're running towards the explosion while you're outsmarting them getting in the TARDIS. Like, all of the dread stuff is there, but then the climax is a different story to then what it was building to. And a different ending may have resolved a lot of these issues. The second you make the monster's greatest skill impersonation, the rest of the story being built around surreal physical monsters, it's taken what the monsters are good at and gone in the complete opposite direction. When someone impersonating you should be identifyingly terrifying. For a story where the setting is about existential dread, the monsters are completely physical threats. Themes. What's it about? A story may be full of events and themes and characters and relationships, but what's at its core? What's the heart beating at the center of it? What makes it special? Two things unique to this premise. One, we get to see David Tennant and Catherine Tate play evil versions of themselves. Two, 14 and Donna are thick as thieves and yet haven't seen each other in 15 years. So what's being explored here? What's the dramatic question tying all of this together? Initially, I thought they're stuck on a spaceship. 14 is eager to be reckless, and Donna is terrified of never seeing her family again. There's constant horror tropes. It's clearly a story about survival. But then what makes this episode a unique experiment? Bigger budget? Is that it? Experimental in what they can pull off visually? Like, look at the character dilemmas and relationships again. 14 and Donna are at arm's length despite being reunited after 15 years, and the monsters are replicas of themselves. It takes what all of its story elements suggest should be a relationship-focused story, built on trust stakes, and frames it entirely as a plot-focused survival stakes story. And this is where I get torn about entertainment, not art. One is not necessarily better than the other. To use Thunderbirds as an example, Thunderbirds isn't necessarily testing whether international rescue can get along. It's not testing the relationships, it's testing the danger, it's testing their physical skill in rescuing people from impossible situations. It's all about the stakes, it's all about the tension, it's all about the time crunch, and this story seems to be doing that in spades. And I keep trying to tell myself, then it shouldn't matter, it's not about their relationship. The Thunderbirds is, by all accounts, a thinner story. It's a 20-minute episode, not a 40 to 50-minute movie-esque evolution of characters that have had really deep characters till now. And so you can enjoy it as entertainment. So in this case,
if they're going for the more tense it is, the better it is, then it's quite good. But that climax where it's trying to get tension out of Donna dying because of 14's mistake, it unravels the wrong challenge. When I watch something like Thunderbirds, the conflict is very clearly set up as there is a danger and it will get more dangerous until they rescue them from that danger. Here, they have 14 and Donna arguing about their opposing conflicts, going off on a bunch of existential physical monster threat, solving a mystery plot, and then coming back around to, oh, if only we had a code word, if only we were that close, that we had something that only we would know. Like, the middle doesn't fit with what's starting and ending here. So as much as I want to say, well, it's really entertaining, but it's not art, I think what's actually happening is whether entertainment or art, whether it has a deep moral or theme, or whether it is just trying for bombastic survival, it's not landing its core conflict. It's not to take away from the effort and mastery on display. It's really hard to build that tension and demonstrates how well they can layer the dread and the mystery, and the scene where the monsters and the captain's plot collide is such a good scene. As the second episode in only 3, it's a really rich, unique place to be. If the first episode is all set up and family grounding, the second episode should be able to take all of those building blocks and really challenge it. That's why a lot of second movies are like the darkest and the deepest and the most, they're usually the one with the famous popular villain in it. They're usually the one when the threat skyrockets to 10. And that's clearly what they're trying for here. And for the most part, that succeeds. But the more I think about the villain's plan, and the more I think about what it evolves in the trilogy of episodes, it comes up lacking. It's an easy opportunity to miss because the dread and the mystery is so well presented, but it sacrifices the imposter elements in service of mystery and existential dread. Still good, but this really could have been something special. But looking at the elements and how it uses them, the captain's plot is an average story that happens to be elevated by the writer's ability to create tension, rather than a story with a philosophical, moral, psychological takeaway that only this story at this time in the era can tell, which naturally evolves on a dilemma that only these characters with only this relationship at only this time in only this situation can provide. The dramatic question: the monsters give themselves away far more often than 14 or Donna legitimately identify each other. Imagine what they could do with how well do 14 and Donna know each other as a dramatic question, as opposed to how well can aliens replicate human concepts. The first question is far more thematically rich than the second, and while I often instantly forgive the first episode for already having enough on its plate, establishing the groundwork and characters and relationships and settings in their ordinary world, this episode was really going for something interesting, was really swinging for the fences, and while it has a lot of engaging moments, a lot of which are existentially interesting and held up by great performances, when it comes down to it, I hit the scene with 14 choosing between two Donnas, asked myself why he got the answer wrong, and come up with nothing, except for because they wanted a cheap fake out. And then I start thinking about all the ways this story had every potential to set that moment up as even more emotionally potent than Donna waiting for death already was. And I think about all the ways this story had all the right elements to make that climactic choice matter, and how if it had gone down that road instead of the superficial one it did, it inevitably would have been better for it. The damage of a wasted hook, and dear God, it could have been done both if it hadn't wasted its opening on a single empty joke, instead of spending its time properly doing the emotional legwork the rest of the episode needed. It's very possible that I'm wrestling with the episode because I'm thinking story first, and they're seeing this as a vehicle to experiment with the new budget in as much of a sci-fi setting as possible, and I'm sure in the long run they'll be better off for having done that experiment, but that still ultimately results in a style over substance story. I think they challenged themselves stylistically, but if they could mesh the two together, then I think they should challenge themselves emotionally. If the story is truly two friends and the monsters are them, utilize them being the monsters to its fullest. If the story is two friends and the monsters are them, utilize what a monster Donna and a monster 14 would be like. The style is a lot of fun. It's a shallow plot that has been well dramatized, which is very fascinating to me.
It's nice to have something to chew on. The bones are leagues more entertaining than it's been in a long while. There's just not much meat on those bones. The blue yonder is a perfect example of something that is a great sensory detail. It gives an oomph to the mystery when the TARDIS first runs away, and a dramatic entrance when it reappears. As an episode title and a thematic center, what did any of that actually mean? Donna comments on it by saying, it sounds all jaunty and fun, but it's not. It's the military going to war. But then at the end, it's played as a saving grace. Was Wilf wrong? What's the lesson here? It has that same air as Gandalf rescuing the army. And then using the TARDIS to save Donna, 14 recalls that conversation and asks, why is Mrs. Bean funny? What does that callback tell us about anything? Because it doesn't show that they were bonding and thus their connection ultimately saves them, because 14 got it wrong and Donna almost died. Is the TARDIS arriving a bad thing? The not things mentioning hearing war, but why? All of the war elements just seem to be thin filters over the plot and have nothing to do with anything. This concept had so much emotionally rich potential, and yet when it's all said and done, it's mostly superficial, and 14 having an outburst and Donna initially panicking is an exception.
Dramatization.
Dialogue, no matter what, it excels at having people talk to each other like people. They miscommunicate, they reason, they guess, they're fallible, and they trip up. Not 14 tries to prove he's 14 and then says, hold on, that doesn't work either. Because that's what 14 would say. Not 14 is playing fair to the point of undermining itself. I keep coming back to the perfect example of Ryan saying, how do you feel, Doctor? And Whittaker saying, angry. And that's just not how people talk. And it's not an engaging way for characters to talk. There's the contrasting of voice, where 14 is grunting and making noises, while not 14 is dead-faced and singing, why? When the show isn't concealing which is which, you can instantly tell which is 14 and which 14 is not 14 because of the different way not 14 talks. His accent is different. His way of talking is slightly robotic. It's all about slow. The words are slow. The ship is slow. Is that it? There's less cadence when 14 is usually jumping all over the room. He goes from, let me think, to, nope, and even jumps from countdown to, I said so, I translated, I just never heard him out loud. They're expressing how they feel indirectly, talking not because the audience needs to know it, but because they as people organically need to know it. Whether it's the natural banter between Tennant and Tate as actors, or the organic relationship between 14 and Donna, or the fact I believe wholeheartedly that they care about what happened to the captain, it's the way they emphasize words. It's the way they talk casually, and it's the way they complement the dialogue with behavioral habits. Like when Donna says, oh my god, where are we? And 14 grabs her hand, puts it on his chest, and stares into her as if he's saying, it's okay, we'll be okay, look at me. So when he says, I will get you home, that dialogue doesn't just feel like a promise to the audience, it feels like what 14 was saying the whole time. These little actions between the dialogue are dialogue themselves. The teeth-grinding growl that Tennant puts in his voice for not 14 when he says, oh, I see. When something's gone, it keeps existing, is such a creepy change in voice, and I can hear the revelation in it. Gaps. So I feel I should explain this. Robert McKee said that gaps are when a character takes an action, gets an unexpected result, and the risks the character has to take escalates. It's a great way to take a character's dilemma and make it harder and harder in natural ways. It seems primarily used in the turning points, but almost any time you can take a character's intention and say, but obstacle, I think it basically applies, except here it's a little odd. They're doing it and maintaining surprise by lingering on revealing which of the characters is real or not, but technically for the most part what the characters are doing or expecting isn't what's causing the gap. The first time they discover the not things, Donna and 14 are expecting each other, and it is somewhat of a surprise, but it's nothing Donna and 14 are doing that fails and thus ups the stakes. The not things more often than not give themselves away, so there's twists and turns and reveals, but not many of them are really consequences of character actions. The only one I can think of is when 14 and Donna are running away from the not things, and they try to climb up a ladder, but the ship changes and they are separated. All the other times, while it's engaging and tense, 14 and Donna aren't actively escalating the
situation. They're just waiting for the not things to make a mistake. And then what ups the stakes is the not things learn not to do that. While this means we never get the same reveal twice in the same way, it does mean that there isn't really a consistent way to combat them. We just have to assume they ran out of ways or arbitrarily became impossible to identify, which inevitably results in the story having 14 handwave his ability to realize he got the wrong Donna by noticing her arm was 0.08, whatever measurement they used, too long. Most of their gaps in this particular mystery should come from 14 and Donna trying to solve the captain's plan, only for it to backfire somehow. But the captain's plan doesn't actively fight back in any way, and the monsters willingly want 14 and Tennant to figure it out, so there's no actual antagonism here. Just scare. Just a drip feed of information. Technically, the more I think about it, the not things are the ones that keep encountering gaps. They try a thing, 14 or Donna point out how humans don't do that, and then oh, I see, like, the villains are the ones making the mistakes. The villains are the ones who have to take further and further risks. Temptations. Because this is a story in which the main characters are pursued rather than forced to fight back, a lot more mileage is gained out of punishing a character's resistance than it is punishing their attempts. For example, 14 knows that it's probably not Donna, but she brings up the flux and that sets him off. He even says, "You're trying to upset me," and he still collapses because he can't hold it in. In the same way, later 14 realizes that thinking is detrimental, so he tries to stop. But he's having so much trouble, he is viscerally restless. And every time he gives in and starts thinking about it, the monsters catch up. This is how, despite fewer gaps as I understand them, and a less proactive story, it maintains its escalation in mystery and dread. Escalation. As is part of the design, because the monsters want to assimilate and learn, the escalation comes from 14 and Donna getting closer and closer to discovering the captain's plan. Meanwhile, the not things are getting closer and closer to assimilating 14 and Donna. While anyone becoming the Doctor is bad, and any kind of identity theft is threatening, both dread and mystery function as individual countdowns that culminate when the not things announce, "We are as clever as you," and use 14 Donna's information to go after the robot. From a tension standpoint, the escalation in both dread and mystery is what keeps the episode alive, and what makes the scene with all four of them discovering the captain's death such a tense scene, and a clear lead into the final countdown, complete with 14 literally concluding the real world ship's countdown has to speed up. All the hallmarks of a dramatic escalation and final act. The irony here is that it's intense every time I watch it, but the dread and the mystery shouldn't work together. When the dread comes from the monsters wanting to scare 14 and Donna, and the mystery comes from the monsters also wanting answers so they can take over the ship or stop the captain's plan. When you think about it, their motivations completely contradict themselves. And contradiction is fine, but undermines characterization unless clarified as an intentional weakness. So their best course of action was actually to accept the Doctor's request for peace and help 14 Donna figure out the captain's plan. They can still scare them and learn from them if their plan fails. While the not things are creepy, the way they go about trying to trick 14 and Donna doesn't work to their benefit in either direction. They're not trying to tear Donna and 14 apart, so impersonating them doesn't actually help. Yet they're actively driving away the only two people who actively want to solve the same information they do. It's easy to say, well, they're aliens, so maybe they don't think logically, but writers do. And in an episode with doppelgangers whose best trick is impersonating someone you're close to, giving the doppelgangers illogical self-sabotaging motivations enables the episode to cheat and have the not things give themselves away without expecting 14 and Donna to ever really try and figure it out. If this episode is a game of Among Us, they're playing with imposters who aren't trying very hard, and they're not written to be holding back on purpose. Just the way they're utilized for antagonism is using their design as a crutch while handicapping their effectiveness. It's like, even though I wrote this, I'm realizing this. Like, I enjoy it when I watch it, and then I think about how it functions, and it just shouldn't work. Setup and payoff. The thing about setups and payoffs is while they can sometimes be misused or underused as merely callbacks or foreshadowing mystery clues, ultimately they reward the viewer for paying attention and give the story a sense of momentum, like an achievement or a stepping stone. It gives us the same feeling as a revelation or a catharsis or any form of question and answer or anticipation and result or hunger and eating. Just as a question feels incomplete without an answer, a setup feels incomplete without a payoff. Subtle setups are better because one can just let the story feel natural and then surprise the audience with more meaning than expected. But double duty payoffs are even better because you can develop an entire forest out of a single seed while maintaining cohesion. The best payoffs are inevitable yet surprising. Here's the setups and payoffs that I noticed. Setup. It's not a war song, it's Joey. Then 14 says,
Mrs. Bean, and they both laugh. The payoff, 14 asks Donna, why is Mrs. Bean funny? The problem with this is, as I said, it is just a callback, but I'm not sure it's a payoff. Why does it matter why Mrs. Bean is funny? Why does 14 pick Donna too? Why is the only reason he realizes his mistake because of an arbitrary arm measurement? Again, saying your arms are too long is a callback, but not a payoff. They've already said that line multiple times at the start, and the monsters have already learned their lesson from that. It's clear they just want to quote that to be quotable, but it's absolutely something the monsters should no longer be getting wrong, and it's a really shallow reason for them to finally be overcome. Setup. Donna says Wilf will camp out for days. Payoff. They surprise us by landing a day or two out, only to find Wilf waiting there. This to me is a payoff because it meant Donna was right. All of her concerns were right. She made a offhand prediction that could subtly be missed, only to surprise us with something that was inevitable because they baited it, and yet surprising because we were expecting her family, not Wilf. Double setup, like a countdown, or a warning. Slow warning. Payoff number 1, when Not 14 says, it's all about slow. And payoff number 2, when Tennant says, I said so, I said it was a countdown. They managed to set up 2 different plot points in that one piece of information. Setup. 14 is reading the captain's console, and he reads 109876544321. Payoff. Fenn's law coerced brace means 1098. 14 then says, and I kind of missed this because of how fast Tennant was talking the first time, but he does say, I translated the numbers, I just never heard them out loud. I suspect there's a lot more than what I initially noticed, but I also suspect they'll all naturally come up when I read Dread and Mystery. Action and consequences. In an episode where the main threat could believably lie and or tell harsh truths, I think the tie thing and the flux thing is a good example of what builds and what doesn't. With 14 and Not Donna, we have the Mimic telling 14 both things he doesn't want to hear and things he didn't know Donna knew. That's good stuff for us because we're learning things that the characters themselves would never admit, but 14 doesn't use what he knows about Donna to decipher Donna, wouldn't bring that up. Donna just melts. There's plot setup and payoff in that. It brings up some story stuff, and then 14 reacts to it, and then 14 asks Donna at the end for clarification, making for a nice resolution. It seeds doubt in him that Donna is being honest with him, but there's no real consequence to 14 learning how to tell true Donna from fake Donna in a fundamental scene that saves her life, and the climax requires such a scene to make sense. On the flip side, while Donna's story about Southampton is amusingly characterful, and to us makes clear the only the real Donna would go on that much of a rant, the situation is again undone due to the time misstep and not due to any deep revelation from either of them. While Tennant's line read in this scene is one of my favorite things from a spectacle and performance perspective, you could easily switch the scene around so that 14 is real and Donna is fake, and the consequences wouldn't change. At the end of the day, we have 2 scenes that are chilling because we don't know which one is which, but there is no way to know which is which because there is no characterization to draw differences from, and no deeper revelations to challenge, so one has to melt and one has to misunderstand ties. Until that reveal, for a story strong in planting mystery, there's no clue. It's just 14 and Donna in 2 rooms, and eventually they arbitrarily decide which one is going to collapse. In 14's case, revealing Donna's awareness of the flux does mean that if they then reveal 14 was never there, it wouldn't hit the same. So 14 hearing about the flux is a good example of necessary cause and effect. But Donna and Not 14 is a bad example because it's easily reversed with no repercussions. Even on 14's side, Donna's responses of how they never talk may as well have come from the real Donna anyway, so you have 2 scenes that would have been more effective as one scene between real 14 and real Donna than either 2 imposter scenes achieved. It may as well have been 14 and Donna both in the room together because they're so good at being one another that there's no real threat until one of them arbitrarily slips, and then they become cartoonishly evil and easily identifiable. An imposter threat like this requires subtle mistakes, or it's just a black and white, may as well be them, followed by definitely not them. It may as well just be Donna and 14 trapped on a ship with a single unknown illusionary threat, basically Amy's choice, where no matter what happens, both characters are terrified the other person isn't real. The deepest damage the Not Things can achieve is making them question reality, but the monsters mimic reality perfectly until for some contrived reason they don't. Transitions. This one got me, and I think this is pretty much what people will remember about the episode. Cutting from 14 and Donna in the same room to 14 in a completely different room, great 2+2. Understanding that that can't be possible and something is wrong without saying it. The second that happened, I lost my mind, and that is true engagement. That I was doing 2+2 trying to figure out what was happening. Did we just time split?
Is that not Tennant? What is going on? That is what makes for a really good reveal turning point. And the dread comes from not directly, immediately revealing what it means. Emotions. Heartbreak. How is the story creating a sense of heartbreak? Things go wrong. The character has a tangible reaction to it. We sit with it. There's emotional weight. 14's face when the TARDIS is gone. Just breathing. Blank state of shock. Donna asks if he can get it back. He just stares at her with dire intensity as she breaks down. The moment where Donna turns on Tennant and blames him for getting her to wander off, only for him to turn around and blame her for the coffee thing after directly saying it wasn't her fault. Donna breaking down when she says, "Oh my god, where are we?" Donna opening up after she feels she might not be able to get back. 14 saying, "All four of us know it's Gallifrey," and not Donna saying, "Except it's not." And then Not Donna proceeds to completely trigger the Doctor. Despite Not Donna weirdly being so much like Donna that she ends up giving 14 a conversation that was useful, the fact that Not Donna says, "We haven't stopped to talk, we haven't had a chance, it's always like that with you running from one thing to the next," and 14 steps, "I know!" And then Not Donna says, "I'm sorry." Like that is a doppelganger really putting in the work to give 14 therapy. 14's complete outburst. Visceral, character-defining action. 14 choosing to bring the Flux situation up at the end and clarify whether Donna knows what Not Donna claimed. The whole story could have been built off this. This is where the double-edged sword is for me. How Donna knows 14 far more than 14 knows Donna. Not having seen her in 15 years. I guess I'm saying I wish there was more heartbreak, and maybe it's fair to say that this just isn't the episode's priority, but then it hinges its climactic decision on that. There were so many ways to play on the idea that Donna has seen the Doctor's entire life, but 14 has missed out on 15 years of Donna's life. There's a whole story right there. How is the story creating a sense of humor? Characters have a sense of confusion or surprise and respond in an out-of-the-box or tongue-in-cheek way. 14 saying Fenn's law into the robot, trying to figure out if it knows the language. I think he's literally waiting for it to respond, because he's like, "I don't know what this word means. I don't know what the robot means. You, robot, Fenn's law? No?" 14 saying, "Stay there, Jimbo, no sudden moves." 14 sitting in the captain's chair and saying, "We've got a chair, that's a good sign. It's a life form with a bum." Donna saying, "Is that stuff dangerous?" And 14 saying, "No." And then licks it, aggressively reacts, and then becomes Graham and goes, "No." Not 14 saying, "You were born in Chiswick," and already has a face like, "This feels like a trap question." And then Donna springs the trap by saying, "No, because I was actually born in Southampton." Cutting back to Donna and not 14. And not 14 looks like he's regretting his choices. Actually, now I think about it, I reckon it's the same face he had when he first ran into Donna and he was like, "What are you doing there?" When the wall rotates and they say, "That was lucky," and then it rotates back around, or not. When 14 says, if we're slow, they can't read us. And Donna goes, "For how long?" And 14's like, "There's a 4 on the plan." I love how Tennant can he gets these sentences. He can make the slightest reaction sound like the most normal, He makes ordinary exposition seem like a detective quest. He makes ordinary responses feel like a best friendship. Donna saying this is therapeutic and then punching Not Donna in the face. Dread. How is the story creating a sense of dread? It plays on existential fear, emphasizes both that the ship is empty and yet they are being watched. Trapped within a metaphorical void, the world around them is slow and their existential identity is being slowly stolen. When there's a mysterious figure in the distance. But what is it? The Doctor calls out to it and says, "We just landed by accident, I hope that's okay," and the whatever it is doesn't reassure them. When the camera looks through the hole, emphasizing they are not alone. Donna saying, "But that means we've landed in the middle of hostile action." 14 says, "Yeah." Donna says, "There's something on this ship so bad the TARDIS run away." When 14 comes back into the room and slides down, he was very active a minute ago, and now he's smiling weirdly, then he's frowning. Something feels off. 14 and Donna being in separate rooms. As much as the line, "My arms are too long," will be what people remember because it's repeated, the line, "Oh, we get hungry, don't we?" was the one that really shook me. Because Tennant saying, "My arms are too long," had me going, okay, we know Tennant's in the other room. He said, "My arms are too long." That is not Tennant. That's weird. But the line, "Oh, we get hungry, don't we?" is what took it from, that is not 14, to that is not 14 and thinking about eating something. What's the bet they're cannibalistic monsters. That's the line that made me go, you don't want a new being realizing that food is a thing. Especially when later Donna says to 14, they're looking at us like food. Not 14's sad face when he says, we are not things. When he says, we want to travel there, to play your vicious games and win. When not Donna said, love letters don't travel very far, and neither do your lies. Creepy. How is the story creating a sense of unease? By giving ordinary human moments in absolutely inhuman ways. Not 14 singing, why? It just comes completely out of nowhere and is oddly inhuman. He doesn't even appear to have noticed he said it. The moment Not 14 says, Auntie Iris, Mummy and Daddy, Donna, 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 Donna. The imagery, of course, because of the CGI and because I've grown up, is not as scary, but very definitely, if I'd seen that as a kid, I would have had that. Like, that is a nightmarish image. The way Tennant just yells it, Donna showing how long her arm is. It's odd CGI, but uncanny enough that it was still a shock. Not 14 saying food is interesting, because once I saw out the arms, and then his arm like cracks. It's that sound. It's the way it stretches back to normality. And then he says, I have a problem with the jaw. And again, the way the word jaw drops has that uncanny sense. The way Tennant delivers the lines and the way my memory replays it, engagement. How is the story creating a sense of engagement? By taking the ordinary dimensions of physics and playing with it. Also, the way the not things respond to or understand physical and abstract concepts. Playing with size as the not things become too large. Or not 14 saying, I'll take my tie off. What's that going to prove? They might have a different perception of surface. Skin and clothes might be the same thing. So if we meet another doctor with his tie, that's not me. But when he first did that, that was very convincing to me. I was like, that makes sense. That's how you can differentiate them. That's how Smith and his doppelganger, they swap shoes. When Donna says, I am definitely Donna, where's your tie? I took it off. I know, it was there on the floor, so where is it? And the way, it's not just the way Not 14 says, oh, I see, but the way he says, I took it off. Like, he understands off as it is gone. So what do you mean, where is it? It's not, it's gone. And then Donna being confused makes him confused, which in turn makes him realize there is a difference in what she means by where is it. He intuits from what she said, it's still meant to be on the floor. 14 baiting the not things with salt and superstition, using the idea that they can think two things at once to sell a lie. Surprising. How is the story creating a sense of surprise? By giving you something ordinary, but in an unusual context. For me, this was when he said sonic screwdriver, non-sonic screwdriver. Also, the Thunderbird reference. Just 14 and Donna casually saying "Milady." Thank you, Parker. I just wasn't expecting a Thunderbirds reference. I really appreciated that. Mysterious. How is the story creating a sense of mystery? By giving you hard, concrete information that organically implies certain requirements. Defying those requirements, i.e. the ship is so big it should be full of people but it's empty, and then drip-feeding seemingly disconnected pieces of information that we trust will inevitably all mesh together into one clear answer. When Donna says the TARDIS played a war song, what for? When the robot takes one step and they say, oh, one step at a time, is that it? When 14 says life signs, none, just an empty chair. 14 casually saying someone opened the airlock 3 years ago, and then it closed. Misdirection as Donna assumes they came in the airlock. Donna says, because the TARDIS will come back for us, they know that. So if they become us, the TARDIS will come back for them. Then 14 says, is that where you want to escape? When Donna says, what are they scaring us for? 14 ignores her and says, problem is 10 minutes ago they've ripped that door off its hinges. Now they're just standing there locking into shape, almost complete. Donna says, yes, but if you listen to my question, thank you very much. Why are they making us so scared? If they want to copy us, why don't they just sit in the corner and do it? Why terrorize us? 14 says, that's a really good question. Why provoke us? Unless, oh, that's how it's done. We think faster and faster and faster. By the way, my favorite line in this, goosebumps like Braille. We're thinking faster and faster and faster. Goosebumps like Braille. You're reading us, is that right? If we're slow, they can't read us. Oh, this is one of those double setup moments. Because Donna says, what do we do? Stop being scared. 14 says, like the ship all ticking over in neutral. Donna, stop thinking. So he compares them thinking slow to the ship operating slow. So 14 has both figured out what the ship is doing and not giving it to the not things. Mystery and dread together. How the episode merges the two. When Not 14 says, how can you not think on a ship full of questions? Why the empty chair? Why do the walls keep moving? What are the words in the air? What did the airlock open and close 3 years ago? Not 14 saying, how can you not think on a ship full of questions? Why the empty chair? Why did the walls keep moving? What are the words in the air? Why did the airlock open and close 3 years ago? Donna saying, don't
don't. And 14 go, but it's... Donna's saying, stop it. And then not 14 bringing it home with, and what is that? When 14 is struggling not to think. And he goes, let me think. And the not things are taunting him. Think. When 14 looks into the enemy's eyes and says, why is the captain outside? Why is she in a spaceship with no helmet? And why don't you know? Turns their own question drilling back on them. And Tennant's face as the not thing really sells that he doesn't know. Not 14's face when he's like begging into 14's face. I feel bad for him. He looks so sad. So looking into my script, all the moments where mystery and dread were done well in the episode, I pretty much just noted down every action that occurred within the scene with the four of them when they're figuring out why the captain died, and pretty much just wrote the entire scene. So I won't read out every single beat that happens in that, but let's just say the scene where all four of them are challenging each other for answers, solid turning point, just a really good scene, characterful. How is the story creating a sense of characterfulness? By putting characters in unusual situations and having them respond in ways that are unique and consistent with what we know of them, or actions, responses that are unusual. How is the story creating a sense of characterfulness? By putting characters in an unusual situation and having them act or respond in ways that are unique and consistent with what we know of them, or actions, responses that are unusual, but then dwelled upon as unusual. When 14 says to the monsters, whatever shape you want to take, that's fine, do whatever you want. I just want to say it's very nice to meet you. I'm the doctor, this is Donna. Donna says, so are they. Doctor says, if you can get those bodies to calm down, then we can talk. That'll be nice, don't you think? And then Donna says they're looking at us like food. Dude, that is a perfect example of 14 actually trying to bond with creatures that very clearly want to kill them both. When the not things say, we are not things and you are not nothing, and 14 responds, oh, I think you'll find we're quite something. When the not things become large, not scary, but energetic and engaging. There's just the way their faces are scrunched, the way they're squashed together, just a very characterful monster. Again, when 14 doubles down on the peace thing by saying, we should reason with them, try to make peace. Welcome them to our side of the universe. Maybe later. When Donna says, well, you're not the doctor because he knows everything, and then Tennant's obviously like, except for the million times when I don't, and I tell you so, don't I? The moment where 14 has the outburst, and then afterwards hears the dinging of the shape change, and he just looks down the hallway and says, good. Like, after that outburst, it's like, uh-oh, what you gonna do? The more I look at the dramatization and the emotional stuff, I do lean towards it's a very well-made episode. I do feel that not exploring Donna and 14's relationship directly is a misstep that will cost them in the long term over these 3 episodes. But as a standalone, it's still very strong. Odd stuff. Most of the odd stuff is nitpicks that I just didn't know where else to put. Weird word association. It happened again. The last time we had Once Upon a Time Lord. This time we have, what was that word? Mavity. Although this time there was a scene during it where Donna says Mavity, and Tennant turns to her like he's noticed something as amiss, and then says, oh yeah, right. But then later also says Mavity again, no correction, no sense of confusion, and then says gravity at the end. Donna's confused, he corrects to Mavity. It almost has to mean something later, and not because I think, oh, it has to because it's clearly setting something up. It has to because it's so useless here. It's so oddly inserted as nothing but a joke, and that Mavity wow joke comes up right after the captain died. So even if it's setting something up, that joke is quite poorly placed, not emotionally potent. I think you get it, but I wrote an entire page on how the Mavity gag just costs the rest of the episode. Time, pace, setups, tonal whiplash. No, I'm gonna read it. The Isaac Newton stuff is jarring, and you have no idea how much foundational grounding it wastes. The TARDIS could end up in anywhere in time and space. Ending up at the edge of the universe is an organic consequence, whereas ending up in a tree with Isaac Newton being flippant about both the danger and the coffee and the situation, and Donna instantly telling Newton about the time machine is all far too chipper for the situation they're actually in, especially when their current situation should render them stuck and they're at at each other's throats seconds later about that very mistake. This knocks all the wind out of the sails of the cliffhanger's consequences and creates whiplash for what is to come. I don't care what race he is. The whole scene takes all the story elements and potential I've listed so far and suspends them for no deeper purpose beyond a throwaway gag, and a very loose, weak throwaway gag at that. Gravity of the situation at least fits the tone, for they perform it as tongue-in-cheek as the cheesiest setting around them, but Mavity is just empty and stupid. Once again, a bizarre knock-knock pun to open the episode, where it would have been better off laying the groundwork, but by extension, it wastes the hook on an unfocused side quest. It wastes precious setup time for an irrelevant gag, and it ultimately costs the episode its depth, now having to rush the setup in the next scene. Also, the TARDIS is smoking. They are in danger. They are busy making jokes, even though the next minute we see the TARDIS is spitting flames and abandoning them. How? This isn't tone setting, this is total whiplash. Logistical nonsense. It is a harmful scene to the story. The exact opposite of everything it needs to be doing for the rest of the story to function. I'm glad I read that. That was cathartic. Overly silly. Not Donna saying, I just couldn't keep it together. You were so amazing. What are ya? Wait, not 14 is full of sadness and cold malice and weird facial nuance. Not Donna just comes off as melodramatic to me. Tennant's face in his crotch would terrify me as a kid, but just gave me Red Dwarf parody vibes. This episode would fit very well in Red Dwarf. Blatantly dumb decisions. They split up. Donna even says, hostile action. The TARDIS ran away because of hostile action. Yet 14 insists on being in separate rooms. What inevitably happens? Unexplained. 14 says, I wonder where the TARDIS goes when it flies away. Why would it go anywhere? It's a time machine. It's not like an Uber that drops you off, has to kill 30 minutes, and then come pick you back up. It would just time travel to the next time it finds you. The cliffhanger. I feel harsh putting the cliffhanger in odd stuff. The Wilf side of it, it's so glad to have him in it at all. As much as I love Bernard Cribbins in Doctor Who, there's an episode of Faulty Towers that he is in when he was a lot younger, and yeah, go watch that. It's really good. But the cliffhanger element of the episode, much like the last one, it's very clear that these are self-contained episodic episodes that don't quite know how to hit on a final closing hook that is focused on the episode. So they sort of have a resolution of, wait till I tell the boss, or I invoked a salt superstition, but then something else happens and Donna goes, I don't know, I did it again, telegraphing that the thing has happened. Oh, we could end up in anywhere, time and space. Or, yeah, Wilf being like, oh, you're back, good, because the world is ending. Like, they just really tack it on in a way that is not organically meshing with the rest of the episode. It is very clearly, it may as well be the next Time On trailer. Telegraph. Most of this odd stuff is nitpicks, but the too many knees is a bit too much. Like, we already repeated the my arms are too long several times, then we show that the arms are long, and then it just keeps going. The jaw was a shock moment. There's a ringing gong and everything, like trying to be uncanny, but at this point just listing off too many things. They naturally build from, my arm is too long, do I have a problem with the jaw? And then it's like they had to give Catherine Tate something to do. Good. And then she's like, what about the knees? And then they're just like showing it off. Hey, you just could have cut 5 seconds earlier. It's just not adding much. Nitpick at its core. Patterns. The not sonic screwdriver and the salt. The things that 14 is able to pull out of his pocket is starting to get strange. I don't mind it, but it's gonna start feeling like a cheat if that's just a regular thing he does multiple times per episode. Anticipation for the future. The thing about the boss and 14 saying he has a bad feeling about invoking superstition, I'm starting to wonder if this is the equivalent of Bad Wolf, or whether Davies is just baiting for Gatwa's stories with the boss thing, and the invoking superstition is just a closing thought on why the monsters are scary and still out there somehow. I've been burned too many times with what seems to be a building mystery that isn't, and it's actually just
writers being colourful. WandaVision really did me in, sounding like teasers and hooks. WandaVision, Flux, Force Awakens, I've really stopped hoping things pay off. Closing thoughts. I think the episode's really well made. I'm seeing a lot of people compare it to other episodes, and I did the same. When I first watched it, I was like, that is very much like Midnight. But the more I've thought about it, and the more Doctor Who has done Doppelgangers plenty, I want to try and compare what they were doing and what this is doing, to attempt to emphasize why I think the climax is falling short. So, I've compared it to Flux. I've tried to take it on its own merits. I now want to try comparing it to what came before. I'm not sure if that's fair. If it's fair to compare when it shows its strengths, I feel like it's fair to compare when it shows its weakness. So, comparing what emulates the best episodes to those best episodes may actually help me articulate the part that I feel is missing. Again, it's a really good episode with just a few missteps that pull it down from being those best episodes. Contrasting examples. In Midnight, the monster challenged how arrogant Ten gets without Donna around, and challenged how easily corrupted we would become if a monster could copy our voice, and challenged how the monster directly undercuts Ten's ability to talk his way out of a situation, especially when he used that very strength, his voice, to bond them together to begin with. The line, "The stewardess, did anyone get her name?" hammered this philosophical reflection home. When human mob turns on each other, how human can we remain? How would we use our word? In Turn Left, the threat challenged how lost Donna gets without the Doctor around, and challenged her insecurities under the frame that she was nothing but a temp who achieved nothing in life and yet was encountering doomsday scenario after doomsday scenario and came to discover she was directly responsible for it, and actually she's an extremely important person who has the sole ability to resurrect the Doctor. When the world turns cold and disaster strikes, how much are we willing to sacrifice to make it better? How much difference do we really believe we can make? We learn something fundamental about both Ten and Donna as characters and their relationships by challenging them with these stories. And by extension, we learn something about ourselves through vicarious experience. In Heaven Sent, the Doctor announces how persistent he will be, how much he will use his grief to break out. There is a mystery. He comes across little clues as he explores the rooms, but he is constantly followed by the personification of death. He is constantly forced to confess things that are hard to accept, before he finally refuses to confess anymore and willingly dies over and over again, his ultimate decision to confront death until he gains the willpower to live again. When faced with grief, when we lose someone we can't get back, how many seconds in eternity, and what would it take before we get back up? We learn a lot about Capaldi's Doctor and how he handles grief, and by extension, reflect on how we ourselves would handle that situation. Where I'm falling short here is I don't think we learn much about 14 and Donna from how they handle this situation. The monsters are the ones taking the risks. The monsters are the ones failing. They're just a bit put out, and then they figure out the information they need, and then they escape. It's tense, but it lacks that universal human core. How we as individuals would handle being lost in space is nowhere near as universal as how we would face the idea that we drifted apart from someone we were once close to, and now, trying to relive those glory days, that old bond might be gone, or at the very least, extremely hard to get back. It's conventionally difficult for them, existentially interesting on the surface level, but it's not fundamentally challenging, and this story had every right to go there. And as far as imposters go, they could have challenged them in so many more ways. In the Red Dwarf episode Siren, Lister is being impersonated. They tell both Listers to play guitar, and one of the Listers plays exceptionally well, so they proceed to shoot him. See, they can't ask Lister anything he'd already know, because the Siren already knows it. As they put it, the real Lister thinks he can play guitar, and promptly catch out the Siren who doesn't know enough to suck at it. They have to ask Lister questions that he himself would get wrong because of personal bias. They have to know him better than he knows himself. The Sirens also pretend to be a girl Lister has pined over all his life, and despite his better instincts, he can't bear to risk whether it's her or not and goes out to find her. Then when the Siren pretends to be Lister, they can't be sure whether he's already on board or not, and so they have to let both of them onto the ship. It seems to me rather than risking it and leaving Donna to die, 14's best bet was to risk letting both of them on the TARDIS, escaping the explosion, and then sorting out which Donna was real. It's so hand-wavy the way he decides, and then
concludes to change his mind, when the imposter angle leads to so many more interesting ways for the not things to manipulate them. It's a tense survival story, but it's a shallow survival story. The hook and the climactic decision are the weakest components. All of its strengths, which there are plenty of, are held up by the performances or the editing or the individual scene execution. It's held back by its overall structure and its lack of thematic core. It's good TV, but it's not quite cohesively coming together when it had such a unique premise. When its weakest moments are the opening scene where most good stories put forth a strong dramatic question, and the scene where most stories land that culminating catharsis by answering that thematic question, it really lets the story down when it was so close to being one of the best. The only reason I keep hitting it with such perfectionism is it had the potential to be up there with the stories considered near perfect. It's got all the hallmarks of an S-tier Doctor Who story and great atmosphere, but not much under the surface. This episode is really interesting for that, and for that alone I'm grateful to have something to chew on again. Chibnall Era was a lot easier to say, it's empty, case closed. Whereas this episode does so much more to compensate for it that I'm torn. Humans can believe two things at once. It's extremely engaging, and yet it's not that great.
Doctor Who, the giggle.
Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Who, Doctor Doc, giggle and hoot, giggle and hoot, giggle and hoot, 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 Stooky Bill, Stooky Bill, Stooky Bull, ah ha ha, shooty gatwa, shooty gatwa, shooty gatwa, new Doctor Who, the giggle. This one actually took me a while. I mean, I was trying to keep up with them. This started as an experiment to test out storytelling theory on what I hoped would be a really good series of episodes, and then I could also do them as the episodes came out, practicing keeping up with something in real time. And then Christmas hit, and then the actual breakdown became difficult, and this is 52 pages. It's size 18, but this one I thought, wow, after the first two, I feel like I've said everything there is to say, and it's just the same, things happen arbitrarily, and then I looked at it more analytically and why it's happening, and turns out I have a lot to say. The premise. The world is going mad, and at the heart of the issue is an old foe, the Toy Maker, an untouchable elemental force. Different types of episodes. It's inherently more shallow than the first two episodes, but this is a different type of episode. If the first one was built on a grounded family drama with a sci-fi subplot, the second is an experimental sci-fi adventure with a human relationship subplot. The third feels like two plots mashed together, and it can't quite decide which one is the main one, but they don't ever occur cohesively. This one feels like pure entertainment intentionally. Typical evil villain comes to town, Doctor has to stop them. But then every so often it stops to suggest a different plotline about the Doctor being exhausted, and then in the last 10 minutes it completely abandons the big bad threat that's been there consistently all along to treat that subplot like it was exclusively the main plot. At the expense of its original Toymaker plotline, it last minute pretends it was a completely different story. Both are decent individually, but they don't really build off each other. As an anniversary concept, I get bringing back a first Doctor enemy, bringing in the next Doctor, bringing back a classic companion, and bringing back a unit. But I've got to admit, in concept, it feels like diminished returns from Chibnall's 60th. It too had a bombastic laser-wielding enemy, unit, another single Doctor cameo without explanation, regen fake out, the claim of settling down with a companion, which Yaz got short end of the stick there, 14 regenerates with Donna and Mal, but Whittaker insists on doing it alone, a cackling villain who the Doctor goes into the past to find and ends up fighting them again in the future. Like, they're structurally the same with similar elements, minus all of the other celebratory things that Chibnall did for the sake of anniversary nostalgia, like the classic Doctors and Daleks and Cybermen. Like, don't get me wrong, Power of the Doctor is overly stuffed fluff full of cameos, but at least it felt overly stuffed in a very celebratory way. Here it just feels like it's copying Moffat's 50th and Chibnall's 60th, and otherwise being a retread of everything Davies did himself. Admittedly, between Moffat's 50th having every Doctor and Chibnall's having every classic Doctor, maybe it would have been diminished returns no matter what it did on that front. But I wasn't necessarily clamoring for a multi-Doctor story until I saw how most of the references are just 14 and Gatwa verbally listing adventures, implying that the Doctor travels were like traumatizing from the get-go and not a kind of rush that the Doctor as a hero willingly enjoys and seeks out. What really made the Doctor a hero figure to me is like he's fictional. In the real world, all this stuff gets to us and we're burnt out and we need therapy and all that stuff. And it's nice on some level to see the Doctor also get some therapy, but he was the sort of character that sought out that thrilling adventure, that challenge to be overcome. And as a character represented that persistence, represented the very willpower of resilience. As a trilogy, it's quite strange as well. Having each episode be completely different tone and genre, I suppose, is good advertisement and celebrating how the show functions on different levels, but these are all on the same platform, so there's very little chance of someone starting at episode 2 or 3, and doing them individually with only 3 episodes doesn't give the arc much to work with. Whether purely episodical or as an arc, I still don't think this would work, because things like bioregeneration come out of nowhere, no matter how much time they theoretically develop them, and the Toymaker is just noise until defeated. Not at all tied to the Meep saying the boss, and yet completely tied to a moment where 14 pulled out Salt from nowhere, and even if they built up the Toymaker over more episodes, the sudden switch from big Toymaker threat to low-key 2-Doctor therapy session completely derails the story as a result. I really enjoy the parts with Gatwa in it, but they introduced him in such a needlessly nonsense and roundabout way that it sabotages the episode's stakes to do so. The actual ending to this episode only remotely works as a conclusion to the modern era as a whole, which it wasn't about due to its loose anniversary details, while the Toymaker plotline feels mostly self-contained and suddenly easily sidelined by a simple game of ball. And while that sounds like the best of both worlds, it's exactly what makes everything from Gatwa's arrival to 14's retirement feel like a completely different and tacked on episode. The Toymaker comes and goes without a single consequence. The only lingering effect is to show he ever existed is a hammer Gatwa gets from the TARDIS that the Toymaker is never shown to have or use, and it only exists to unwrite the nonsense in an equally nonsense way. It doesn't feel nearly as overstuffed as Power of the Doctor, but equally as thin, and I think that's what bothers me most. While I sat through the thinness of Chibnall hoping that something would come after it and get better, this committing similar issues just hits home a little harder. It's equally as thin until it suddenly wants to get extremely earnest, and it's so unearned by the lack of personal dramatization during the Doctor and Toymaker plotline that it doesn't feel earnest, it feels like an afterthought. As a finale, it also struggles as a finale because it's vaguely trying to pay off 2 plot lines at once. Finales as a rule tend to take what came before and try to make it matter, so this also struggles as a finale to both Davies' 3-episode run and the modern Who run, and for Doctor Who in general. I have a really tough time trying to decide whether it was worth bringing David Tennant back just to keep him around, whether it's just his Doctor who gets to live on or all of them, whether the Doctor traveling is now considered a positive thing or an inherently traumatic thing, whether it's a short vacation or an entire life, and it feels like at the end of the day just an excuse to leave a vague gap for Big Finish to fill in any way they desire, which I suppose is great creatively for them, but the open-endedness of this leaves me with a hollow feeling when it comes to the finality of 14 retiring. It feels more like a reward to the 10th Doctor specifically, but implies the Doctor has wanted to stop since the start, and then shows Gatwa flying off with no attempt to say goodbye, so what did he really learn or recover from during the break? Then it implies 14 flies off on an adventure anyway, like he just gets a reward because the 10th Doctor suffered, and he doesn't have to let go of anything, no sacrifice, not even the TARDIS. The Meta-Crisis Doctor taking a break made sense, because he was human, in love with Rose, and had no TARDIS. This strips it of all of that, and says he stopped because he really should, but he didn't really stop because he couldn't. It would hurt too much. That's like saying an alcoholic needed beer too much. It feels so non-committal that I get the sense I'm supposed to ignore it. At which point, why have 14 and Gatwa ever splinter off? Just have Gatwa come in from the future and tell him to take a break. No need for two TARDISes, no need for two Doctors simultaneously. As much as it would seem like less for novelty's sake, it was also far less convoluted when one Doctor became the next. Much like the Timeless Child, in my opinion, it's a randomly created thing with huge lore implications for the sake of it, and then doesn't get explored and harms it more than heals. And if the rule becomes that even regeneration doesn't matter, the show is running out of things to tangibly invest in long term. How the 3 episodes mirror the era. In some ways, I think I get what they were going for. Each episode mirrors a different type of Doctor Who episode, and showcases the variety Doctor Who offers. The Star Beast mirrors episodes more like when the Adipose or Jadoon arrive, a typical intro story introducing the new Doctor and their companion, and the Foundations going forward, usually with a villain that is small scale invading Earth and complete with campy humour, with the sci-fi elements downplayed to maintain focus on the human elements. Wild Blue Yonder mirrors episodes that are more specifically high concept and genre heavy, like Midnight or Heaven Sent. Bottle-ish episodes where the monster is a highlight above the cast. These episodes are usually used as isolated experiments, feature some kind of monster gimmick, and stand out to long-time viewers as a result, as their function is generally to trust that foundations have already been laid and they are free to try new things, without the burden or pressure that comes with finales or plot continuity heavy stories, although the best types do both. Heaven Sent still progressing Capaldi's grief, Midnight still progressing Ten's arrogance, Flightline still progressing Clara's escalation to being like the Doctor. It shouldn't have been as surprising as it was then that the 3rd episode mirrors the action-heavy set-piece driven emotionally bombastic regeneration stories that represent endings for the Doctor. But since we've had one of these only 3 episodes ago, it doesn't really offer nearly as much just on a been there, done that sort of level. In a way, it's funny that Davies didn't want to do a multi-Doctor story, because Jodie's didn't really feel like one either beyond Ruth and Gatwa's inclusion. So it feels like just another regeneration story, and the gimmick of bi-regeneration doesn't really add anything. We didn't need an excuse for a new Doctor to show up. Capaldi did it in the 50th, Smith did it to Tennant in the 50th, all of the Doctors showed up in the 50th. They have a time machine. Showing up wherever they need to be is what they do. It's literally the premise of the show. In all fairness, there's not much anniversary left. End of Time already celebrated Davies Who. Night of the Doctor, Day of the Doctor, and Time of the Doctor all come together to celebrate both the show's anniversary and Smith's run, and the 8th Doctor classic era evolving into the modern era. Capaldi's regeneration also acted as swan song to both Capaldi and Moffat and Murray Gold. And then when they tacked on another episode, they included the 1st Doctor. Part of the reason most of the anniversaries are multi-Doctor stories is it allows it to feel not just like a finale for the current Doctor, which all regeneration stories are anyway, but a clear culmination for multiple storylines because those eras' protagonists are equally involved. Saying it's a culmination for all of the Doctor's history, but it's just Tennant's face, feels like a lie. 10 needed a break. 10 wanted to be able to stop. 10 wanted a reward. And it just feels like a retread to claim the Doctor finally got a break. But then, in the same few minutes, we see the next Doctor instantly fly off again. Most Doctors have functioned on radical acceptance, an inspiration to encourage us to fight our own demons. But Tennant's Doctor always has trouble for some reason. And I get the idea of fighting your inner demons, believe me. But this is fictional. Not every hero has to be traumatized to the point of burnout. And worse, overcome that burnout off screen. And he's the only one that got to stick around as an alternate incarnation twice. Did 14 even regenerate at all, or shed his skin? Is he a new 14, 10 used up regen energy to become himself? Even when it comes to bi-regeneration and Tennant still being around, we did this already. Davies did this already. At the end of the day, the 50th was such a big celebration that I think I wrote off comparing them pretty much the second I saw the Star Beast, because 3 self-contained episodes were never gonna do the punchiness of one singular 50th anniversary. But geez, did it have to be so similar to Chibnall's? Moffat's 50th and Chibnall's 60th both managed to get pretty much every classic Doctor in there somehow, and it's funny how it's probably all been done to death nostalgically, but it's both the best time to do it nostalgically and yet the cheapest time to do very little with it. It might age much better once I've got more attachment to Gatwa, but I find these 3 episodes very hollow at a time when I was hoping for so much more after sitting through the decline of Chibnall's Who. This has more interesting characters, but there's not much development when it's 3 episodes and they're all resolved by arbitrary randomization. It feels like Davies took one thing from the start, one thing from the classic, one thing from predecessors, and one thing from his new tenure, and they're there, cobbled together whether it made sense or not. If I complain about Chibnall doing it, it's only fair to complain when Davies does it. Otherwise, Davies just went back to Ten and Tate because they were free at the time and did whatever he wanted without reason or rhyme within the narrative. Just every episode for 3 episodes wrote himself into a corner and then made some stuff up to get out of it. I appreciate it as far as presentation and spectacle goes, but when it's all said and done, the concept doesn't really bring much to the table, and all 3 anniversary episodes individually just feel like a few light callbacks at best. Again, Chibnall's Who was so recent and similar that it feels lesser just by abundance comparison. Exhausted. Every time I look at this episode, I think, Chibnall just did this, and that bums me out. Davies' Anniversary feels like a copycat of every other modern showrunner, including his own, but it doesn't substantially contribute much. So when Davies coming back was a big promise that we'd get something fresh, I get that it's an anniversary, but it doesn't feel fresh. And since it's an anniversary, maybe it couldn't. Yet it doesn't really have all that much to celebrate either. So it resorted to one-off cameos, also like Chibnall did, but less of them. I was excited that Davies as a writer was coming back, and the spectacle entertainment itself is leagues better than it's been in a while, and I hate feeling like that because I feel like I'm taking it for granted, but I'm bothered because it feels like Davies is taking the story rules for granted as well. Davies has inherently more lively action than Chibnall's Who did, but if it was shallow there, it's pretty shallow here too, which makes it feel doubly shallow, so even novelty won't save it. It's a bit of harmless fun as an episode, and I'm just bitter about how cheap the writing feels overall, but if Davies gets to have a second go at it, I don't think, whatever he feels like should be the standard. The way 14 is supposedly running on fumes feels so meta for the show that I think it ironically points out to me that it's not really doing anything substantially different, self-contained, or as an anniversary. 14 isn't running on fumes, the show is. I am. Fans are. It's still running on the attitude that you can just fill the screen with noise and not care about whether your narrative makes sense. Arguably there is an overarching narrative here. 9 was freshly post-war, 10 was saying he'd lived too long, 11 was running away from it all, 12 said he was tired and didn't want it changed anymore. 13 was standoffish and lost her home a second time and lost her heritage. And then the Doctor was suddenly reverted back to an old face and regeneration was going weird. The story itself does feel like a natural step in the Doctor's story, but only because 11 thought he fixed the Time War. 12 thought he'd fixed himself through kindness, and then 13's error just demolished all of the above with no reason or rhyme or arc to be had about it. The meta-narrative for a while has been how much the show is going backwards, which is a hard thing for a story to celebrate. It's acknowledging the flaws of retreading storylines, treating it like an intentional character beat, and then resolving it off-screen like we don't need the therapy too as an audience. This episode both claims to be about spinning your wheels, and yet to me spins its wheels as a concept. Like, it's fine. These episodes are fine. The episode concepts are fine. They're not bad, which is good, but on all fronts, ironically, for 3 anniversary specials, there's nothing really special about them. Characters. Protagonistic force. The 14th Doctor. Costumes. I didn't think to list costumes the first 2 episodes, but something I have noticed throughout all 3 is that while 14's hair is high like before, he does look increasingly unkempt. He's not just naturally older looking than 10, he has an unshaven beard, his coat isn't swishing as much, and it seems a little less cleanly worn. I do think this is an intentional choice to show 14 as both regressing nostalgically with the same face and showing his wear and tear in his lack of energy and youth. Like, don't get me wrong, Tennant is still spry and energetic, but it seems an intentional choice to dress him like he's not at all holding it together. Special traits. 14 is quick to act, but completely on the back foot. He is burnt out, running on fumes, impulsive, and struggles with dealing with a threat beyond his pay grade. Dilemma: 14 wants to shut down the Giggle and defeat the Toymaker, but the Toymaker plays games for a living and cannot be defeated any other way. So 14 is backed into a corner where games of chance seem like his only option. Donna. Costume. Donna's striped shirt and coat give Donna a mix between work ethic and casual humanness. She blends right in as both the Doctor's companion and a potential member of UNIT. Special traits. Donna is gung-ho, sharply aware, and struggles with, not much in this episode, admittedly. It's kind of odd that she spent episode 1 insisting she has a family now, then episode 2 desperately trying to get them back and nearly dies, and then here, Wilf tells her, go with the Doctor, and she does. Like, she fights some puppets in one scene, but otherwise is pretty much taking a backseat. She encounters Wilf and then goes off with the Doctor. It's not out of character, but Donna is somewhat sidelined when getting back to Rose, Wilf, Sylvia, and Sean was her main priority for 2 episodes, like 2 minutes ago, and she almost never saw them again. Now there's a general end-of-the-world threat, and she just assumes they're safe. Wilf says they're safe, so I understand why she believes them, but it's just strange to see 2 episodes where Donna's active problem is potentially dying, and then in the 3rd episode, she's not at all concerned anymore, and it's not really brought up, and 14 says he doesn't know if he can save her, and he never needs to. It almost never comes up that Donna might even be tempted to go see her family, or express concern for them. Nah, just have Wilf say, you go with the Doctor, and that's all it gets. She's not irrelevant to episode 3, but she had such an active role that her passivity here stands out. I get how given the end of the world, she would stay with the Doctor and support the Doctor, and given the amount of screen time she gets, she's still a main character, but she feels jarringly sidelined when the specials as a whole actively brought 14 and Donna back and gave Donna a family she actively wanted to get back to. So again, there's that core dynamic that these episodes were entirely built around. So there's just an odd lack of payoff there. Dilemma. It's good to see Donna is still a proactive character. She's not sidelined and acting out of character. She just has far less personally at stake in this story. No real proper dilemma beyond help Doctor, world in danger. Nice goal, but flat, unspecific, and obligatory. The 15th Doctor. Costume. This is the part that made me realize the costumes were worth noting, but only for the main characters, really. Most people are in unit clothing and general clothes or uniforms, but Ncuti Gatwa spent the entire climax in his underwear. Why? Well, as far as I can tell, it's because it shows off his confidence and general flair for taking life easy. Also, I didn't notice 14 wasn't wearing shoes, but something about the way Gatwa can carry the scene side by side with 14, and as far as I'm concerned, not be overshadowed, shows how pivotal 15 is to the climax, and I fundamentally believe 14 would have lost the game without him. I was already excited for Gatwa to appear, but his ability to maintain a presence in the scene, underwear and all, and come out swinging with pure confidence, was absolutely engaging and reassuring. Special traits. 15 is confident, emotionally mature, and energized. At least within the context of this story, he doesn't struggle with much, but in this case, this is his intended strength. He does mistakenly get too excited when he throws the ball to 14, and it's unclear which traits will continue as ongoing over his run. But within this story, 15's role is like a saving grace. A future Doctor arriving to lift a past Doctor back up when the Doctor himself is so burnt out that even regeneration itself is creating clothes and reverting to old faces and now splintering. He's like the Hail Mary to the problem, the Vision to Ultron. I only thought of this as I'm writing it, and it wouldn't mean this was well done, but it would retroactively improve it if at some point in the future Gatwa discovers how to make bioregeneration happen, and then we see David Tennant regenerating to Gatwa officially down the track, then they could do some kind of retroactive time travel cause and effect thing where Gatwa intentionally went back in time, and so this isn't Gatwa at the start of his run. I get the regeneration is basically sci-fi magic and we don't necessarily need an explanation for how it works, but the issue I have with it is purely cause and effect. And while it's implied 14 does a bunch of stuff off screen and then becomes Gatwa again now, there's no need for him to do that nor become this Gatwa. Unless 14 becomes Gatwa in real time, another Gatwa in the past, our future, Gatwa's past, and then that Gatwa, over some time, uses 14's initial regeneration to go back to that point, and it's some kind of like 11's jacket twist where this wasn't just a random thing that occurred, but something that that is something that our current tenant didn't regenerate, did some stuff, did regenerate, and then that regeneration came back and arrived early as a future incarnation to help out now. It's more convoluted that way, but it would actually plot justify it. It'd just be nice to see any Doctor previously study it, or it be a result of any character choice. It's convoluted, but where there are narrative holes, there are opportunities, and it shows how much it takes to patch what isn't explained. With the right setup and payoff, Bi-Regeneration could have been the Super Saiyan moment to David Tennant's Krillin moment. If Gatwa's arrival had been the well-earned payoff it could have been, it could have reignited Doctor Who for years to come. Like, think about what an impact Goku transforming for the first time after they built up what a Super Saiyan legend was. As it is, it's a cheap gimmick, but I'm completely glad about the part where Gatwa gets to be included in the episode. It was just such an unnecessarily roundabout way of doing it. Dilemma. Gatwa wants to support and rescue 14 so he can retire into therapy and give 15 a new chance in life, free of the burden and exhaustion that came to all the modern Doctors that came before. But the Toymaker is a sneaky opponent and is taking every opportunity to throw to the tired, struggling Doctor instead of the spry new Doctor. Antagonistic force. The Toymaker. Costume. The Toymaker looks like a Toymaker. Shiny purple tie and all. In fact, he kind of reminds me of the 11th Doctor. Then he looks like a ringmaster. Then he looks like a pilot with the goggles, scarf, haircut and all. The Toymaker plays with his costumes as he plays with everything else. Special traits. The Toymaker admittedly feels more like a being of chaos than a being of play. Which is weird when Tennant says play is the third option outside of order and chaos. I actually completely agree that play is the happy middle ground between the order of story rules and the chaos of letting creativity flow. But as I feel like Davies often cheats in his rules, play is actually not what's happening here. The Toymaker is straight up chaotic, with the single rule that he'll surrender if he loses a game, and he can lose a game anytime the writer needs him to. There's no real order to it. It doesn't engage or play with the audience. It's just chaos that is arbitrarily decided by the writer. The Toymaker is playful, spiteful, sarcastic, and sadistic. He's completely blind to empathy. Like, let's be honest, he's Neil Patrick Harris being all the chaotic characters he's been before. All the flavors of Count Olaf, Dr. Horrible, and Barney are present, combined with the cruel, chaotic dancing and singing and murder that you get from the Master. From Neil Patrick Harris's ability to stutter and then look embarrassed, to his habit of putting on airs and insisting that things are going well when they clearly aren't, to playing charismatic and chipper characters whose very joy come from a dark urge to mask pain with pleasure. It's all of Neil Patrick Harris's best go-to acting traits under the context that this character has magic powers and is fundamentally driven by childish cruelty. I want to elaborate here. Like, when I say play is between order and chaos, that's like if you're playing Monopoly and then you just flip the board. Like, you're not playing anymore, you're just being chaotic. You're flipping the rules up into the air and saying, nothing matters. And that's not play. That's actually ruining the game for everyone else. Like, play is when you take the rules and you can have a whole bunch of fun ways to bend the rules to your benefit. And then you get, the dice and the random chaos within the rules. That's what creates play. It's fair chaos, held up by order. Dilemma. He wants to bait the Doctor out and beat him in a game, but the Doctor is clever and lucky. The Toymaker's existence is bound by play and he must play fair. And as the 11th Doctor would say when backed into a corner, the core rule of the Doctor is never tell me the rules. Which is a line I love in isolation, but as far as narrative analysis goes, I really hate what it's done to the flippant writing of Doctor Who. As the Toymaker says, all that exists is to win or to lose. Like, what a sad existence. It reminds me of Capaldi saying, I'm not trying to win, except the Toymaker is. He has to. He's trapped forever, either winning or losing. And at the end of the day, what does he really get out of it? He enjoys play so sadistically because he hates it. He's mad that the Doctor beat him, but he's even madder, I think, that he even has to play. As the Doctor said, he has no choice. He's trying desperately to win, but only because the alternative is losing. And unfortunately for him, both are always an option, yet the only options. The Toymaker can't ever encounter a draw and then walk away to do anything else. Donna says to 14, the dice don't know what you did last time, but for the Toymaker who has to gamble forever, sooner or later losing must feel like the odds getting revenge on him. He doesn't love games, he loves winning, or feels that he has to love winning because losing gets him punished. I think he feels empty either way, so he uses games to take revenge out on the world. You can see why he insists it's not fair to lose, if he never really had the freedom of choice to begin with. And especially with the doctors, he didn't choose to double them, and he didn't choose the game of catch. Imagine being told you have to play a game with someone, and then being told you accidentally gave them the advantage, and then being told you have to accept the game anyway, and then being told you lose because you couldn't catch a single ball. You're the god of games and you couldn't catch a ball. It's interesting to me that the Doctor banishes the Toymaker when he could wish for so many things. Make him mortal. The Toymaker only acts the way he does because he overdoes it. He revels in play and he does it spitefully to get some sense of freedom back. And they placed him in a box for eternity. There's something oddly cruel about the way the two Doctors gang up on the Toymaker and delight in his loss. The Toymaker's entire existence seems to depend on him winning games. His entire source of gaining anything in life is play. So naturally, eventually, he stops enjoying them for the sake of enjoying them and starts enjoying the pure spite of it. And then gets petty, of course, when he doesn't get a reward out of it. Sore winning and sore losing is all he has left. Though, as with most, he could have accepted the Doctor's offer and rediscovered a love of games, or even bargained a way to defy his existence and led a more nuanced human life somehow. But that line from 14, infinite games, may have sabotaged them. Infinite games isn't what the Toymaker wants, it's what he's used to. I think saying that made the Toymaker remember why he resents it, and he turns on the city because he'd rather just burn it all down. Theoretically, he is fueled by games and does inherently enjoy them, but I'd love to see how the god of games becomes more interested in a theatre of cruelty. Theoretically, he is fueled by games and does inherently enjoy them, but I'd love to see how the god of games once became more interested in a theatre of cruelty. He isn't the game maker after all, he's the toy maker. He enjoys puppets and toys and fun, and competitive games aren't it. Support. Kate Stewart. Special skills. Well, admittedly, I usually find Kate's character kind of boring. I know she's meant to be a stoic leader, so she's not meant to be characterful, but as a leader I've seen her do very little that I remember, other than defer to the Doctor and say stock lines like, "What do we do now, Doctor?" or "What does that mean, Doctor?" or "Yes, I'd like to know that too," or "I like this regeneration, I hope I see it again." Like, she's generally been bland and passive in the past, but in fairness, this episode gave her some nuance. Like, Kate is stoic, which makes her appear bland to me, and we rarely see beneath that surface, yet here they demonstrate that she is nervous. Deferring to the Doctor because dealing with alien threats means we often only see her on the back foot. Well, except for the Grand Serpent thing, but that whole thing was nonsense. Her role is to lead unit, but usually we only see her in a Doomsday level situation where the Doctor needs to take over, and as a result we've never seen a fair representation of Kate handling an emotionally difficult situation herself. She either completely has it handled with no substantial reaction, or passes it to the Doctor. It feels to me, and I get this is harsh, like the characters keep showing up for anniversaries purely by the merit of being Lethbridge Stewart's daughter and proxy leader of unit, so she's classic nostalgia in name only. Script-wise, she's rarely given anything to strive for. When she was affected by the giggle, that was interesting and a step up. It was something. That said, while they gave her some nuance here, I'm not sure what it actually contributed in the story, because after that scene we never see anyone affected or at risk of being affected by the giggle again, and we already saw the man on the street, so establishing its effects was kind of wasted, though an interesting scene, presentation-wise, and it was quite a dangerous position to put Kate, the leader of unit, in, like drinking her own poisoned wine when you think, don't they have taste testers for that? So unless Kate's personal confessions lead to anything down the road, I'm not sure it was anything we needed to risk demonstrating. I like it as a moment in the episode, but constructively it doesn't contribute as much as it seems to. It's just kind of padding. Dilemma. Kate wants to take down a satellite, but she needs the Doctor's permission. And then an unstoppable god breaks into a previously secure base. Mel, special traits. Mel is good with computers and knows basic music theory. I don't know enough about Mel, classic Doctor Who wise, to say much else, but the way they portray her reactions with Tennant, she already has a more sweet and fond relationship with Tennant than either Ace or Tegan seem to have with Whittaker. So her inclusion feels nice, although between Donna, Mel, Shirley, and Kate, it starts to feel a little redundant having all four of them. Like a bunch of dialogue is heavily split up, just to solve a single mystery that is already resolved the same scene it's introduced. Dilemma. Mel wants to return to Earth and be of use, but feels lonely now that she has lost all of her loved ones. Shirley. Special traits. Shirley is professional, cheeky, and emotionally strong. She struggles with the Toymaker's surreal power and with subtle prejudice for being in a wheelchair without being confined to it. Dilemma. Shirley wants to help the Doctor defeat the Toymaker, but 14 insists that the Toymaker is untouchable and gives her an unscientific explanation. This is kind of my point. I loved having Shirley here, and personally I wouldn't cut any of them just on a but I like them kind of level. But constructively, it shows how you have a single scene to give Donna, Mel, Kate, and Shirley all something of significance to do, and it gets a lot of mileage out of characterful moments for each, but once the Toymaker and Gatwa show up outside, you wouldn't miss any of them narratively outside of target practice for the Toymaker. In some ways I wish they got more fleshing out earlier, which is probably why I love Shirley being here the most, because episode 1 is doing the heavy lifting for her inclusion, whereas the classic era is doing the heavy lifting for Mel, and 50th is doing the heavy lifting for Kate. They're all here for pure nostalgia, and it's nice, but that nostalgia goes nowhere when it's all dropped for a three-way plotline between 14 Gatwa and Toymaker. Shirley doesn't even get to go into the TARDIS even though it now has a ramp. I like these characters, but as soon as Toymaker gets the laser, they're almost not around anymore. And as support, there's too many of them if they're all going to have a single objective and they're all going to be in the same scene. To give a counterexample, in Journey's End, we'd had multiple episodes to re-establish everyone, even Sarah Jane, and they all had a clear role to play in the events. Whereas here, they may all as well be unit soldiers, except they're recognizable faces for the sake of it. Bit parts. TV inventor. Purpose. To kick off the plot. Stooky Bill. Purpose. To provide a memorable image and kick off the plot. Both Stooky Bill and TV inventor may both kick off the plot, but they mash well together. If the TV inventor makes the gun, then Stooky Bill is the bullet. Stooky Sue. Purpose. To be frightening, I guess. It feels like an obligatory inclusion just because of the history of Stooky Bill, but a purposeless scene to give Donna something to do. Victim. Toy buyer. Purpose. To provide an initial recognizable victim, to demonstrate the Toymaker's cruelty if you lose the games, and to make the events between 1925 and 2023 feel linearly connected. Victim. Unit soldiers. Purpose. To demonstrate the damage the Toymaker does to unit. Victim. Righteous street guy. Purpose. To show the effects of the giggle on regular citizens. The Vlinks. Purpose. To justify the Z-Dex, I guess. I'm actually not against some setting flavor. I've been taught by Doctor Who to assume that all robots in the show at some point will go rogue or become a sidekick. At first it bothered me he didn't really do much, but not everything needs to be a big factor in the payoff, and as world-building set dressing, it's perfectly fine as an explanation for the technology they've invented. Like, good bit of world-building flavor. I think the difference here is because the Vlinks is an inanimate, not necessarily active character, he doesn't feel like he needs more of a purpose than he gets. Whereas the four characters of Mel, Donna, Kate, and Shirley all feel like genuine companion side characters with, up until now, their own journeys in the plot. As recognizable faces, they just inherently carry more weight to them. Like, something notable here. There's a lot of characters this time around, and while it helps to make the story feel lived in, this is why I feel it's a bit thinly padded. The street guy already establishes and explains visually and verbally how the giggle works, so Kate didn't need to do that. If we need Kate purely because she needs the Doctor's permission to take out the satellite, that is her only contribution. As far as unit goes, we already saw Shirley in the previous episode, so we don't also need Kate. Shirley can lead that on her own. Mel recognizes the arpeggio, so there's no need for Donna to first figure out the music notes. Mel should be able to figure that out on her own. Mel should be able to explain that one by ear. Like, all of their individual purposes are fine, and their characters make the scene more lively, but there's a lot of splintering the one role of exposition to multiple characters, because individually they have very little agency over the final outcome. And they don't have to have agency over the outcome, but with 4 of them not doing that, it sticks out. And they only have very little agency because the threat is supposed to be on a godly level, yet the playful god only serves the purpose of messing with the nameless goons and has no real way of meaningfully affecting them. What can the Toymaker really make at stake for Mal, or for Kate, or for Shirley? And why do we need all 3 in the room? Wouldn't it be great if the Toymaker showed up and actively took Kate's band away, and then she started shouting at Shirley? That'd be some active antagonism. The kills feel visually striking, but emotionally empty as a result. And the Toymaker's main act of dancing people into falling over is again visually striking, but doesn't really justify why all these characters are here. Kate gets danced at, then Mel gets danced at. Little variety because there's little variety in the roles they're serving. Ultimately, there are too many recognizable characters with too little role to play. Naturally, because they're also recognizable, they also have plot armor, and so their purpose in the plot feels thin and overstuffed. I have the same complaints with Power of the Doctor, but I expect that fun shallowness from Chibnall. I'm surprised by it with Davies. Relationships. Major. 14 versus himself. This is really where I'm frustrated with the episode. Arguably, 14 feels that he's been given a second chance and doesn't know what to do with it, and he's running on fumes, and there's a threat he's not used to dealing with, and he's burnt out. But Tennant and the character of 14 was perfectly spry in the last 2 episodes. And I only believe that stuff because other characters told him that's what's happening internally. He didn't come to that conclusion, he didn't discover it, he didn't feel it inside. We're told by Donna that he never stops, and we're told by Gatwa that he has to just stop now. I get 14 was in denial at the time, and it's clearly meant to be played as true, but frankly, between 14 refusing to give up the TARDIS and 14 still using said TARDIS, I don't even buy that he really truly stopped in order to get rehab out of order, if he keeps going back on the bottle during rehab. And if the bioregeneration happened just to justify a short vacation with Donna, that's a far cry from a leave of absence to fix yourself, as told by Gatwa. I can see in the costuming and the dialogue that in this episode 14 does seem more tired, but I never get the sense that he was wrestling with that internally until now, and it comes out of nowhere because the other characters decide it was a thing, retroactively after he bioregenerates for no apparent reason. It's an after-the-fact explanation built entirely on contrivance. When he asks Donna who he is without the Sonic, it implies he feels like he doesn't know who he is, but he was perfectly fine last episode without that Sonic. It's not until the Toymaker makes him feel powerless that Tennant acts like he's doomed, and I feel like he's reckless not because he's self-imploding, but because the Toymaker provoked him with companion deaths before it. It's not that 14 is fighting himself with exhaustion, it's just a retroactively meta thing to justify 14's new face. Donna says it means he needs to stop, so I guess he does. It wasn't demonstrated in the previous episodes, but it's suddenly afflicting him in droves now. 14 versus Donna. Weirdly, this is what I wanted from the last episode. 14 and Donna are now justifiably working together without Donna wanting to go home. Arguably because she got home and chose to prioritize helping him instead. And funnily enough, when they were trapped in the Toymaker's dominion, I actually said to myself, hooray, Donna and 14 alone to get some time together. And then they got split up. And then Donna fought the puppets for one scene, and then they ran back into each other. So, the point of splitting them up was... But their dynamic at their best is old friends solving problems. I'm concerned that for most of this episode, Donna feels like a passenger who a minute ago had a cool active drive, but now feels like she could be replaced by any companion. Like, seriously, imagine for a second Donna goes home to her family and Mel was serving both roles. The only difference, I guess, would be that he wouldn't say, I don't know if I can save your life this time, because it's playing on the fact Donna almost died the last 2 times. But then again, Donna isn't ever truly in danger in the climax. And while maybe I'll save you is potentially, and while Donna saying maybe I'll save you is potentially an abstract foreshadowing for 14 retiring with her, she doesn't save him from the laser beam either. So it feels a bit loose and unclear anyway. Obviously we want Donna to play that role in the Toymaker's Dominion because she's a fan favorite companion and actually understands 10 and 14 and 10 on a deeper level than most of his companions have, and she can emotionally support the Doctor in ways Mel couldn't, but narratively it sort of proves that Mel is only here for classic nostalgia, and while using both of them to show contrast in modern versus classic companion, it also shows why they sort of filled the same space. Donna does show why she's a fan favorite though. When she quotes her dad, it's like, oh yeah, any other companion would just tell him he's great, but she truly sees him as a regular struggling and striving human without the tools and TARDIS. She just sees her friend. She really gets him on a grounded level. But after that, she just sort of devolves into as much of a support role as any of the others. While I find it amusing that 14 would retire to Donna instead of Rose or Yaz or the Ponds, it does make sense when you consider it's 14's face specifically, and even without the 10 reference, his first face was Donna and Rose, and they are the most grounded family 14 knows. If 14 were to retire, he would retire with Donna. I'm unconvinced the Doctor would retire completely, and maybe that's what the show was going for anyway, and maybe Gatwa demonstrates that the Doctor will always travel again, he just needs a short break. But Donna being here at the end does also help to justify why she was needed for this series above any other pairing. 14 versus the Toymaker. Here's the thing, if the Toymaker was just Sacha Dhawan's master again, would that change anything? Probably it would. Maybe only because the Master can't turn people into colored balls, but you can sci-fi your way around that if you really want to. I mean, what is it about the Toymaker and the Doctor's dynamic, instead of the Master and the Doctor's dynamic, that really changes between here and Power of the Doctor? Well, the Toymaker has less of a personal life with the Doctor, but that's less, not more. What is different is the idea he is bound by the one rule of play. And I say idea because it's played so loosely I feel like it's almost squandered. The Doctor would never combat the Master with a game of cards or a game of catch. The Master would have no motivation to play fair, and I suppose that's what makes the Toymaker feel like a more severe threat, even if to me the Toymaker and Master feel charismatically and emotionally on the same level. They're two human-looking people just dancing and killing and then being defeated in arbitrary ways. But if we're loosely pretending that the Doctor is too burnt out for fun, then the Toymaker is loosely a strong antagonist who threatens him with play. If the Doctor is running out of energy, the Toymaker is a high-energy threat. But I say loosely because it's never defined enough to really attack at the Doctor's central flaw or defined enough to defeat him beyond, oops, bad luck. He's not a very threatening god of games if he's at the mercy of the writer's coin flip. Donna versus Toymaker. This is what I mean when I say it feels like something is missing. Donna was so active, she is also serving a role of supporting 14 throughout his retirement. So when the Toymaker throws the ball and Donna catches it, I really figured that meant something. Metaphorically, the first episode showed Donna and her daughter Rose making their peace with the Doctor-Donna aspects of themselves. 14 is getting too old to play, and the rules state only a Doctor can play. Donna wants to get back to her family, and 14 wants to get some rest with the family. And Rose is also the Doctor. 14 chooses the game of catch, and then the Toymaker laughs that only 2 people couldn't possibly defeat him. Do you see where I'm going with this? When I mentioned this to the same friend I referenced in the first episode, they pretty much said, yeah, Donna should have caught the ball. But I'm going one step further. It is right there that the payoff be all 4 of them playing catch together, and there being too many players for the Toymaker to possibly keep track. Yes, when 14 is fumbling the ball, Donna should be the one to catch it. But Rose and Gatwa are also Doctors. You can do it with 2 or 3 or 4. But it was blatantly set up that Gatwa and 14 weren't the only Doctors in the room, and the Toymaker was supposedly beaten by being outnumbered. The god of games outnumbered by only 2 people. I agree with him, that sounds completely contrived. It might still be any way you slice by regeneration, but all 4 of them playing would have made sense for 14's journey, for Gatwa's involvement, for Rose being introduced in episode 1, for Donna being desperate to get home in episode 2. It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. And it isn't just Tennant accidentally doesn't die, and it isn't Gatwa accidentally pops into existence, and Donna stands around doing nothing, and Rose isn't even present. It instead would have been the 4 doctors ganging up on the god of games, and tired old Tennant playing catch with his newfound family, Donna reuniting with her family, both Doctor and Dr. Donna being empowered by their new futures with each other, being revitalized by Rose and Gatwa respectively as the representation of youth. You didn't need to cheat. There was plenty to work with. Camera went flat. Why don't camera batteries last very long? You didn't need to cheat. There was plenty to work with. But Donna not being involved and Donna also not remotely going back to her family was such a missed opportunity when the entire episode, the entire trilogy, was setting up exactly that. The intention to make this entirely self-contained until the last 10 minutes sabotages it. Donna and her family renewing Tennant, inspiring him to take a break, become more playful, take a second chance, and become a new self. Nothing changes about the ending, but it makes the rest of the episode organically built to it. The climax completely drops the ball. I love that Gatwa is in this. I love that he came back to support his past self. I love the idea of a future Doctor showing up before their run. It's Capaldi's eyebrows, but more. It sacrificed 3 episodes of Doctor and Donna build-up. They sidelined her last minute for a new character. Why bring Doctor and Donna back if you're not going to build to something that is Doctor and Donna-centric? What is with the climactic chaos? What is with the need to cheat when you get to the end? You almost made all 3 episodes retroactively fit together, and instead it's the same problem as last episode again. Random thing gets Doctor out of it. Random thing saves day. Magic, magic, magic. You almost made all 3 episodes retroactively fit together, and instead it's the same problem as last episode again. You get right down to the climax, and suddenly all the tension is dropped out of the sails. 15 versus himself. 15 is 14 renewed, so there's no real internal dilemma here. He's here as a glimmer of hope, and that is perfectly fine for the role he's serving. 15 versus 14. Being a renewed Doctor, I love how 15 and 14 throw to each other, and how 15 gets too into it and doesn't even know his own strength. I wondered at first why 15 and 14 risk throwing to each other, when the whole game is staked on the idea of not dropping it. You wouldn't want to risk either character either having it for too long, but it very much occurred to me the reason they're throwing to each other is because they genuinely have each other's backs. Throwing the ball to each other before throwing it to the toy maker is a moment of safety shared between the two of them. 15 versus Donna. This is where, again, it's a struggle when Donna has been a main character and 15 is a last-minute support character, and yet I put him in as major characters because the role he plays makes him so pivotal to the plot. It shows when a character who has been in 3 episodes gets nothing to do in the climax, and a character we've only just met gets introduced to help solve the problem instead. There was really no build-up to how 15's appearance was needed or demanded. No sense of, it worked, he's here. Just, oh okay, I guess that happened. And so, it ends up feeling like 15 and Donna have no need to interact. Yet 15 completely takes over what Donna's role would have been. It's much like the unit case where either character is fine, but you don't need both. Or it's at least not justifiably clear why you need both. It could also have easily been 15 and Rose against Toymaker, or 15 and Donna. Narratively, once Gatwa pops in, Tennant didn't need to live. But then before Gatwa pops up, narratively 14 also didn't need to die. It's also interchangeable and arbitrary when it comes down to all of these characters in a room with only one collective purpose. Toymaker bad, stop Toymaker. And yet they argue only 14 and Gatwa can play, so despite there being an army, everyone is devolved into target practice, and no one's really at risk either. Every character's role vanishes once Gatwa shows up. 15 versus Toymaker. It's telling that 14, the only character who gets shot by the laser, doesn't even die. Because somehow, for some reason, he too has plot armor. Even though the Toymaker is designed as a purely physical threat, and regeneration stories are designed to kill off the previous Doctor to make room for the next one. And the only reason he survives is because play magic. Even the inconsistent abstract rules of regeneration shouldn't survive that one, and the story knows it. So it just invents an explanation that the Toymaker caused it somehow. Not even you split us or you duplicated us, just you doubled us. It's as vague as it gets because it knows it can't sustain it narratively. And somehow Gatwa is from the future as well, and Tennant and Donna both know and accept this. He's not just a few minutes older. That said, it's cool how Gatwa is characterized in contrast to the Toymaker. In the few moments we get between 15 and Toymaker, we see how the Toymaker considers throwing to Gatwa and then throws to 14 instead, clearly seeing 15 as an equal and 14 being the weak link. There are other indications of this. Toymaker shows his tooth, 15 clicks his tongue. Not impressed. Like he's almost replicating the move, but in a yeah, I can do that too, what else you got? Where 14 flings off his feet when he catches the Toymaker's throw, 15 doesn't. The similarities between Toymaker and 15 help complement the contrasts between 15's jovial nature and 14's exhaustion. Minor, and every other character. I've elected to skip listing every minor combination because ultimately I can sum it up with there's a lot of people in the room and they all have really clear connection with each other. It's pure fun banter and true praise. Davies writes people like people. It's definitely a little cluttered given everyone's role at the end of the day is exposition, but there's a lot of joy in just seeing these characters interact. The way Mal and 14 say, hello, hi, or 14 saying, busy day to Kate is a masterclass on how to get characters having casual conversations with clear relationships and weight and emotional subtext behind it. For all my complaints, the reason it's still relatively fun to watch all 3 episodes is because the banter between everyone is so charming. Setting: Toymaker's shop. The Toymaker's shop. Soho, 1925. It's a nice shop. It demonstrates the Toymaker's character quite well. How it's shaped to help him hide behind a curtain, hide behind a window, or hide behind a shelf, like he's always at a distance and you just can't quite get to him. It's also filled with toys and theatrics. As a villain base, it suits his characterization perfectly. The street. It feels like this was wasted, or like they filmed on the street for marketing purposes. Probably just they didn't have much time to film in it, so it is a one-off beat. Ultimately, it seems like an excuse just to do a caricature, and it's not nuanced. I feel like a lot of people fundamentally agree. People are quite agitated and argumentative these days, but like, you're not helping? Like, it's good we get to see the chaos, but we're meant to believe that everyone in the world has gone violently mad, but then they shoot the satellite, and that should stop them, but we don't see it stop, and then the Doctor seems sad that all those people died, but we didn't see any of that. We didn't see any aftermath. Absolutely, we can infer it, but it just feels so bizarre. We see the street once at the beginning in total chaos, and then we're told it ended, and it's never revisited. We don't see the Doctor, 14 or 15, go back down to help people out. Something about it just really emphasizes that a dire, bloody apocalypse happened, that the Doctor is depressed about it afterwards, and all we saw of it was a one-off joke character. Toymaker's Dominion. All of the Toymaker's stuff works well for vibes and spectacle and entertainment. The hallways, the puppets, it's good. The way it disorientates the Doctor is the way it disorientates us. The puppets do feel like scares for scare's sake, but if cut, the episode would be worse off for it. I guess I just wish the puppets somehow tied more into anything, because otherwise it feels like we have the Toymaker as a threat, and the first half of the story just has this other spectacle stuff, the town and the puppets, that are nice flavor, but take up time in a story that needed more build-up. And once again, a lot of that is just direct versus indirect antagonism. The puppets are scary, but Donna has no real agency or goal, so her beating up the puppets is just a thing that happens. And the puppet saying, I thought I was clever to 14 is scary, but 14's dilemma has nothing to do with being too clever or not clever enough. So it's nice visually, but narratively fluff. If the 14 puppet had Donna's head, that might threaten him. If Stooky Sue was tied to Donna's family somehow, that might get to her a bit more. As it is, creepy imagery is all it had going for it, and it had the potential for far more metaphor than that.
Unit headquarters.
Spaced out, people on computers, the big screens surveying the world. As much as a lot of the set pieces here feel like just nice looking set pieces, I get less atmosphere from these. But thinking about it in contrast to the street, the chaos and destruction of the street allows the cleanliness of the base to feel like a safe place. The illusion that 14 and Donna are coming here means they can't be affected. The Z-Decks and the unit soldiers make it feel like the base is untouchable, so when the Toymaker pops in at will through magic doors, it's all the more shocking and devastating.
Helicopter pad.
Maybe it's because we're so high up and the background is so often sky. Or maybe it's because of the way it's shot and the ball game has unclear logistics. Or maybe it's just because it's a giant circle and for most of it 14 and Toymaker are just standing, sitting and chatting. But this setting really has nothing to it. It's just a flat open surface and most of the characters stand around and it's not very engaging. Perhaps it benefits from an open space as far as the ball game is concerned, but having a real space to play in would have given the game more to work with. They're clearly trying desperately to come up with interesting shots during the game, like climbing up the sidewalls, but there would have been so many more opportunities with a well fleshed out location where they could climb over, step around, throw through, jump above. They needed a location where there was more to do in said location than just throw the ball. It's just a plain flat circle. It shows nothing about the characters, nothing about the dynamics, and gives the characters and director not much to work with.
TARDIS. Thary's ramp. Thary's ramp. It has the Thary's ramp. 10 points. TARDIS. It has the Thary's ramp. Hands down, best scenario. If somehow you don't know who that is, Thary's is a Doctor Who YouTuber who is in a wheelchair and mentioned to RTD that it was a shame he couldn't go in the TARDIS because there were no ramps, and they finally put one in to the next Doctor's TARDIS, implying that Tennant saw the next Doctor put it in, went, hey, that's a good idea, and then didn't put it in until he regenerated or a long time after.
Like, now think about it, Gatwa put a ramp in his TARDIS but 14 didn't. The Hammer brought the TARDIS in from the future and all Gatwa included was a jukebox. Did 14 just never fill his with furniture even though Gatwa told him to put a chair in? Or did Gatwa clear all the furniture back out and then had nothing but a jukebox? Why didn't Gatwa put the chair in? Or is it just not that far in the future? Like, how does any of this work? See, there's a big cause and effect gap here where it's just the hammer does a thing, the laser does a thing. It isn't creating real time copies, but why is Gatwa's TARDIS from the future if he can't have used it yet? I really feel like we need to find out that Gatwa we see in this episode intentionally came back from the future, and the real first regeneration of Gatwa happens some other time at the end of 14's run, very soon from now, so 14 didn't have time to, I don't know, like, to explain where the hammer came from, to explain how Gatwa knew or did any of this, and not because it has to make sense for the sake of it making sense, but because you're literally sacrificing dramatic cause and effect for cheap shortcuts, and filling these holes with character development and achievements genuinely makes it a better payoff. Right now we have nothing substantial to work with. It just do the nonsense. Also, you put in a ramp, but like, why didn't Shirley get to go in it? She's right there. Actually, let's say it's some intentional divine plan for Gatwa to live out some life after 14 and then come back through by regeneration. How do 14 and Donna instantly know he's older? Why does Gatwa tell him that? If Gatwa was only a day older than 14, how did any of these changes occur? If he didn't come back in time, how does he know that? If he appeared here right after 14 officially dies and remembers all of the therapy, why is he surprised about the double TARDIS thing? It's so needlessly convoluted for the sake of telling 14 what his arc has to be. Wait, 15 should have lived through everything that happens in this episode, and yet he comes up with the idea of the hammer like he just came up with it. Plot. The Hook. Toymaker sells Stooky Bill to the inventor of television. The Hook is actually relevant to the plot this time. Establishes the main threat. This is how you introduce a comical historical in a way that matters to the story. It sets up Stooky Bill, it sets up the giggle, it sets up the Toymaker, it sets up that the shop is just down the road from the TV inventor. It takes all the plot pieces and puts them into one cohesive scene. Yes!
Inciting incident.
Unit rescues 14. It's telling that while the street stuff is there to set up the plot side of the giggle, there's no downtime between Donna and 14 to set up the character side, the part where 14 is running on fumes. So when nothing in the plot brings it up until they go to the toy shop, that's why Donna's "but we never stop" comment feels like an afterthought. Character development comes up as a side note to the plot, a subplot, rather than something established from the get-go. The setup is pure plot and a double-edged sword. The episode never feels dull. In fact, sometimes a little rushed. It races towards the climax, so it never loses momentum. But at the cost of strong reaction scenes where character development can really hit home. The only real heartfelt personal stuff is 14 and Mel and 14 and Donna, both of which are showcased as being completely isolated things that don't cohesively meld with the giggle plot. They may as well be cutaway jokes to another episode. So it's both padded and rushed, and 14's retirement as a resolution is seeded but not built to. It really doesn't bring up what it acts like the main plot until where the subplot would go.
The lock-in, or point of no return, or whatever. The first major turning point.
14 discovers the giggle. The protagonists know about the threat, and now they can't stop until it's resolved. 14 snaps at humanity at one point, but it's not evident that what 14 needs to overcome here is his own wariness. There's just an evil thing out there hurting people, and he needs to stop it because he's the Doctor, and the Doctor is narratively obligated to save the world. It's fine for it to be an impersonal threat, but it comes at the cost when the episode wants to end with an impression of a personal character arc. It wants its catharsis to be entirely personal, built on an entirely impersonal setup. This is entirely plot building. Pinch point 1. 14 and Donna find the toy maker. I've realized that the plot stuff I use comes straight from story engineering, where I thought I was using like a mesh. At the end of the day, most formulas and story structures are just character has goal, character encounters new problem, character makes choice based on that problem, and that choice is a turning point. That middle problem part is either the inciting incident or a pinch point or a crisis at the end of the story. But it's all just ups and downs. Problem, solution. But the terms I'm using specifically come from story engineering mostly. So it's not a straight up formula or something to just be replicated verbatim, but it does demonstrate how long it takes structurally for 14 to establish he's having an internal dilemma. It shows how late that is introduced, which makes it feel like a subplot at best. Between We Never Stop to Talk and What Am I Now, this episode covers what the last two episodes suggested but left open. And 14 and Donna are finally talking about it. This is good. Episode 1 resurrected Donna. Episode 2 established they have unspoken things. Episode 3 speaks them. It's something. Letting the toy maker in by casting salt is nonsense. I don't get how that's a game. But okay, we can see the weariness here. He feels guilty, he feels tired, he feels concerned for Donna's safety, and he has "I thought I was clever" rubbed in his face, so he feels responsible for everything and everyone. Midpoint. 14 and Toymaker play a game. Here the Doctor makes a rash decision, but that can be chalked up to the Toymaker's taunts about his companions. It does indicate that he feels personally responsible for them and the Flux, and the more I look at it, especially over the 3 episodes, not just the singular one, there's a lot of subtle progression showing that he's worn out, that the Flux itself has been an exhaustive thing since then, but the setup is really what makes it feel like it wasn't the focus, despite how much of the ending is devoted to it. Pinch point 2. Toymaker invades unit and gets a hold of the laser. Again, structurally, it shows how in real time this feels like the climax. It's where the threat escalates to the final game, and it's winner takes all, and the result of this will permanently determine the result of the plot. The climactic actions here will positively or negatively resolve the plot, and it looks like 14 is going to lose. But you may have realized I said pinch point 2, not the climax. 14 may even die. But if you look at the runtime, this story is far from over. So this isn't the climax. This is just the threat making a comeback after the midpoint. 14 now knows, or feels since it's an arbitrary game of chance, that there truly isn't anything he can do to beat the Toymaker. Even a simple game of cards failed in his favor. He doesn't want to risk it again, but he has to prevent anyone else being involved. And credit to the threat, the Toymaker also knows this and is willing to shoot the Doctor in order to prevent him mouthing off. This isn't the climax. This is the lowest point before the final act. You'd think that this means there's still another game to be played, and the Toymaker has been such a formidable, unstoppable threat that it'll take them all of the last act to defeat him. What a low point, that the Doctor will truly die and the next Doctor will have to resolve the plot in his place. We've never seen the new Doctor this early, so I wonder what they can do that 14 never could. What a great introduction this will be when the 14th Doctor can take down such a threat. Last chance. It's a death fake out. 14 survives for absolutely no reason at all. And lucky him, still gets to become a new Doctor as well. 14 bioregenerates into Gatwa and himself. As a cheap surprise, fine, I get it. In real time, it got me. Cool surprise. Whoa, what a novelty. But you get the same level of surprise having 14 regenerate early instead of after the plot is resolved. And either way, Gatwa functions as literally a renewal of hope. And it shows why this sort of arbitrary Deus Ex Machina falls apart. It's not clear what Gatwa represents till after they win. It's not anything 14 did to earn this outcome. It's not anything anyone figured out. It's not a lucky break because of something he did earlier. It just happens. Can you say contrived any louder? You don't want a character to die? He just doesn't die. You want the next Doctor to show up? He just does. You want both of them on screen at the same time? You want both of them to have their own TARDIS? They just do. He pops out of nowhere because the writer got tired of the antagonist winning everything and just wants to reach right in there and rig the whole thing because the characters, they just win now. No need for cause and effect or action and consequence. What's the point in challenging characters and suspension of disbelief if you can just hand of God them out of it? The last chance is a plot beat is best when it's an option seeded earlier so that the character at their lowest can discover something they didn't think of before, and as a result, demonstrate their internal change. They discover it, they achieve it, because before they were blind to what was preventing them, and now it seems obvious. So now all I can picture is 14 feeling like he lost the card game and he doesn't know what to do next time and realizes that he'd have a better chance with more players and starts thinking, as Gatwa does at the end, that with the Toymaker's rules it would be possible. Due to the character's strength, they find an avenue that beforehand they wouldn't hope for, but now the chips are down and they're willing to risk it. And we start seeing how 14 plans to do that. You can actually explain it before it happens. You don't have to give away what the result would be, just that the 14 plans to sacrifice himself. Explain that he wants to get hit by the laser, as long as it is used by the Toymaker. He can still surprise people by having everyone think the plan is to sacrifice himself, so a new rejuvenated Doctor will arrive instead of him, and then they celebrate because it worked. This seemingly impossible thing. The secret plan that 14 will survive under the Toymaker's rules. So then we get a double whammy payoff, not because of an accident or convenience, but because the Doctor is clever, and he's proved he's not just the toys. He said that. He said that was his central character concern. This is plot action for the sake of plot action. Shouldn't Gatwa's arrival somehow be a result of 14 proving something to himself? Wasn't that the point? He brings in Gatwa intentionally because he knows he needs help and he's willing to put his life on the line to risk it. And it's a risk because he's relying on the magical state of play, something he can't fully control. But if it works, he gets to retire. A positive reward for risking his character on a positive action. The story brings up all of these things as a separate bubble of conversation and then just ignores them to bring in a complete convenience. But all the ways to mesh the two fairly together was right there. Intellectual character setup, impacting physical plot to create emotional payoff. Gatwa's appearance should feel like a complete triumph, not a lucky mistake. I feel like part of why this episode starts to feel like it changes tone is in the same vein as Endgame's victory lap. As soon as 14 doesn't die, all the stakes, given that the Toymaker is a purely physical threat, all the physical stakes are knocked out of the sails. On a meta level, We now know that they're not just going to start popping Doc on a meta level. We know the Toymaker isn't going to shoot again. When the Toymaker made threats a minute ago, we knew he was capable and willing, and followed through by shooting the Doctor mid-speech. But now that 14 has survived, it's given the game away. If they're willing to split the next Doctor instead of killing him, 14 won't die, and since Gatwa is the next Doctor officially, Gatwa is also not going to die. Now, death isn't always the only type of story stake, but when the Toymaker is a purely physical threat, that's all you have to threaten. So when they cut back to the Toymaker saying, "If I could interrupt, behold," that single move has transformed him from a powerful force with a giant laser making threats to a petty child who has no moves left, especially when his very next threat is to do it again. We just know on a narrative level that he can't do it again, and it wouldn't benefit him if he did. The Doctors actively acknowledge this to shut him down. The stakes are gone. There's no sense of uncertainty left. It's so plot focused that the emotional stakes aren't there, and the plot cheated so the physical stakes aren't there. All it would take is for 14 to say, "I think I need to tap out if you got this," and for Gatwa to say, "You can rest when you're done, for now 2 versus 1 doubles the odds, wouldn't you say?" And then Tennant can go, "Well, I'm not really sure if," and Gatwa goes, "No, don't worry, you've got this." And then we think, geez, can they do it? Or is 14 just going to get in the way? Can this new Doctor handle it if 14 fumbles? But any attempt for the Toymaker to make threats now feels silly and empty. Like the Toymaker says, "I'll have a vast meadow of Doctors dying over and over again." No, you won't. And both Doctors know it. And the audience knows it. Which is why they both confidently challenge him to a game. His plan has fallen apart from this moment on. And while they try to make new stakes in the ball game, where 14 nearly drops it several times and 14 is picking up the slack, narratively from here, we know the Toymaker is going to lose. The big question is simply why and how. And unfortunately, the existence of bioregeneration has already tipped reality's hand. How will the Toymaker lose? However the writer feels like. Contrived randomness is now completely on the table. The second thing this scene loses steam on is a game of catch is so dependent on arbitrary dexterity that the why and how simply becomes irrelevant. The Toymaker drops the ball because they threw it and he didn't catch it. There's no complexity or challenge or nuance to this. What the scene probably wants to be is just a victory lap bonding moment between Gatwa and Tennant. But again, this isn't the climax. The stakes should still be in full effect. But it's more than that. There are ways to make a ball catching scene work, and the scene clearly thinks it's established them by introducing the idea of 2 versus 1. If they were playing keep away, maybe that's an advantage. But narratively, there needs to be more work put in to justify why 2 Doctors makes catching easy, and 1 Toymaker, despite all of his usual teleporting powers, is doomed to miss his catch. A climax needs to be surprising yet inevitable. They do touch on it. It's not totally drop stakes from here, but cause and effect is really important in a scene that is otherwise what we call Find Your Keys. Find Your Keys is a scene where it is such an unchallengingly simple task with such arbitrary whys and hows that the scene's only function is to stall for time until one of the characters arbitrarily finds their keys. Extremely delicate setup is required to establish why finding their keys is unusually difficult to do today, and why finding their keys does in fact narratively tie into the metaphor or the theme or the story in a way only those characters could do in that situation, and only finding their keys and only going to extreme lengths to get their keys back could resolve their problem. Again, there's elements to it, but this is where the episode, like all 3 to an extent, drops the ball. The finale rests on arbitrary actions that feel a little too convenient, and not on the success or failure built by their journey and the lessons they've learned along the way. Crisis. And here I was thinking that Gatwa throwing the ball was the climactic decision. But again, maybe it is, and the resolution is just long to wrap up the show's history, like the ending to The Lord of the Rings. Or maybe it isn't, and the plot isn't resolved by defeating the Toymaker. Either way, it presents an issue. Every plot beat until now was heavily focused on the main issue being the Toymaker, and yet he is defeated so quickly that if he is the main plot, it's too early. What are you going to do with the rest of your runtime? And if it's not the main plot, why was the story from the beginning until now so devoted to it? Why was the entire opening and setup devoted to it? In either direction, the resolution is so irrelevant to the opening hook and the climactic decision of ball toss that it feels like it completely changes direction last minute. Let's assume for the sake of narrative analysis that the ball game is only the crisis, not the climactic decision, and the choice to retire is the climactic decision. It's certainly a choice that directly impacts and changes the main character, but the crisis doesn't really put the ability to choose that or not at stake. What the story up until now treated as the main plotline was a generic end-of-the-world scenario and is now rushed and resolved, and we're meant to retroactively assume those few short pauses between scenes where characters had a small heart-to-heart was the real plot all along, not a subplot, not a complete side plot, and not a subplot weaved clearly into the main plot to make one cohesive and surprisingly holistic journey. Instead, those sparingly few side quest scenes of irrelevant emotional dread were the main plot. And all of the Toymaker stuff is sacrificed as a waste of time. They spend so much time in unit, so much time in the Toymaker's domain, so much time in the TARDIS at the resolution, that comparatively the Toymaker's final threat flies by and feels like he was defeated too easily after so much build-up. He has no relevance to the actual ending of the story. The only thing he justifies is doubling the TARDIS. And you didn't need that either. Climactic decision. Gower figures out that he can double the TARDIS, and 14 retires. Once again, everything is possible because the hand of the godly writer made it so. No need to justify plot points organically anymore, just make whatever you want happen. Suspension of disbelief is for suckers. When the whole plot devotes itself to bombastic Toymaker shenanigans, it's so weird to see the final act just be some quiet time between Gatwa and 14. And it would all be fixed with 14's inner plot being better interweaved into the main plot. So he learned he wanted to retire alongside figuring out how to defeat the Toymaker, and acting on that revelation created Gatwa, and creating Gatwa enabled him to retire. See how the way I phrased it, it's actually cause and effect? Same events, same order, but the Doctor is active and earns them? None of this complaining about not quitting until it requires no sacrifice. That's no decision. He's not even committing to it. He can come and go when he likes. The Doctor just stood around letting the Toymaker kill people, gambled with no plan whatsoever, accidentally won, and then claimed a reward. That's not satisfying storytelling. And I'm sorry for getting so mad at it. Because at the end of the day, it's a harmless, decently enjoyable episode. But you poke at it for a second and it collapses. Closing hook. 14 retires with Donna's family. It's a nice idea. I love the scene in isolation, but I think I've thoroughly explored why it feels cheap. They're saying it's necessary, but it wasn't really developed. Theme. What's it about? For 3/4 of this, it's about nothing. And that's okay. But does it want to be a shallow action bombastic story? Or does it want to be a deep dive into the Doctor's therapy? It's a fun romp where a bad guy is doing the villain thing and the hero doesn't know how to stop them. And every now and then there's tiny nuggets, short half scenes, where a character suggests he slow down, and then after all of the fun's over he decides he will slow down, and all of that flux stuff can be dealt with some other day when he's got more energy for it. Like, that's nice, but it really does feel like fluff with a side of flavor until you're supposed to think the flavor was the whole meal. It's basic junk food. The flavor was like a single pickle, and they want you to think the pickle is the whole burger. Nope. They just put a little salt on your Happy Meal. It might taste good for a few minutes, but that doesn't make it a healthy story. That's really the golden takeaway at the end of the day. If you ignore the first act, it's about 14 slowly feeling like he's got nothing left to offer and then retires. But if you ignore the last act, it's about a dangerous threat of the Toymaker and how 14 can't defeat him and gives up. I get retiring isn't giving up, but it's so weird to see the plot transition from hollow spectacle to emotional gut punch, yet it doesn't transition very well from one to the other. There's not a solid through line here, because it starts purely plot, and then slowly trickles in character between the plot, not with the plot. They're not working in tandem. They may as well have inserted them after the fact. And then despite that clear focus, it abruptly drops the plot to pretend it was always about character. It should be both, from beginning to end, melded together as one journey. Feeding the Toymaker earns Tennant his retirement. The dramatic question, Can 14 defeat the Toymaker? No. Well, not on his own. Like, I suppose it counts that 15 and 14 defeat him, but if the question is whether 14 can defeat the Toymaker in a meaningful way, no. He wins by luck. It's completely arbitrary, and the question loses all narrative meaning when it should drive the plot. Even if the question was no, we should learn why Tennant failing to defeat the Toymaker is meaningful and what he learns from failing to defeat the Toymaker. Gatwa just sort of shows up and does it for him, and then tells him what it means. Can 14 finally rest? Yes, but was that a thing he needed until now? Was anyone asking, oh gee, I hope 14 manages to retire, how will he pull that one off? Until the characters suddenly told him to retire and he did so. Like, was the tension ever in 14's inability to retire? Can Donna, I don't know, so this is where she is relegated to background. Like, can Donna get back to her family? Nothing was stopping her, she chose not to. Can 15 help out? Yes, but again, there's no meaning behind it. There's meaning to 15 helping convince 14 to retire, helping Tennant at a time where he's exhausted. But again, no build-up. No tension behind whether 14 will succeed in that goal, because it wasn't established to be a goal. Even a scene with 14 going to the edge and meeting 15, and 15 encouraging him to summon him early. That'd be something. Just anything. Dramatization. I'm sorry for harping on this at this point, because it really is decent spectacle, bad plotting. I came to the conclusion that there's two ways to do drama. One is the story itself, and one is the presentation of it. Trying to go through so many of the little things that made this well presented or poorly presented was frustrating to track, and it mostly felt like just quoting the episode, because the dialogue is always good. The presentation is always good. The momentum and the directing, but looking for deeper dramatic moments and finding nothing but contrived fluff. In both directions, it felt too thin to really analyze, so instead I'm going to demonstrate the drama cycle. The drama cycle isn't necessarily anything groundbreaking. The existence of reveals, dilemmas, actions, and consequences isn't new in isolation, but it's something I drew and I've stuck by ever since. Essentially, the story is built on a problem. The character needs to solve that problem in order to change, and then the consequences allow them to change or not. If these things are meaningful, the story will be meaningful. The journey will be meaningful. So, the drama cycle. You reveal stuff, because something has to show up on screen first. Then there's a problem, and it's not just, oh no, I can't find my keys, but character wants to do a thing, and there's a thing in the way. I believe Aaron Sorkin called it intention and obstacle. I've just been calling it dilemma to merge those things together and have it be the character is trying to propel forward, something is trying to propel them back. Then you have the actions. So after debating upon the dilemma, they decide what they're going to do and they enact it. Whether their choice and actions pay off or not determines what the consequences of their actions will be. And the consequences of their actions will meaningfully reflect back into how we perceive their dilemma and how it affects that character and what it means for that character as an arc. So, dilemma. The Doctor is facing an old enemy that he can't beat. Action. He tells Donna to go back to the TARDIS. Consequence. Nothing. She doesn't go. She isn't really in danger. Her being present doesn't really help him in any way, except the dice comment, but it doesn't change the outcome nor his attitude after he loses the game of cards. Dilemma. The Doctor needs to stop the Toymaker hurting anyone. Action. He offers to join the Toymaker. Consequence. The Toymaker refuses because reasons. Dilemma. The Doctor wants to stop the Toymaker shooting others. Action. He tries to force the Toymaker to play a game. Consequence. The Toymaker shoots him. This at least is something. The Doctor gets what he wants, in that the Toymaker isn't there hurting anyone else, but it backfires, and the Doctor almost dies as a result. Dilemma. The Toymaker wants to play with the next Doctor. Action. He shoots him so he'll regenerate. Consequence. The Doctor splits in two for some reason. Like, it almost has like the Toymaker did a thing and it backfired. But it's such a random consequence that it's not really a consequence. Not one that's directly punishing the Toymaker's actions. Like, see how I keep having to say for reasons or by random? Because there's no world logic here. I know the plot is claiming that the world functions on play, so that's an excuse to write whatever contrivance they want. The problem here is that you can see why the characters choose their actions, but the consequences either are completely inconsequential or have unclear cause and effect, so the consequences don't land as any form of poetic justice.
I think why Davy's characters are so lively is all their character motivations make sense, all their actions make sense. They've got clear problems to solve. They're just always resolved in whatever the writer wants. There's no real reason or rhyme for why an action works or does not work. Dilemma: the Toymaker will only play games. Action: the Doctor picks a game of chance. Consequence: they play a game of chance and one of them wins because luck. Like, at least here they argue it makes it 1-1. I mean, that's just nonsense. But it gives clear stakes that the next game will be the last one. But it's something that, it's a consequence that the Doctor makes up retroactively. I mean, imagine what would have happened. I mean, also, everyone knows that's not how it worked. The Doctor already claimed his prize for the first game, so it's not 1-1. That was a separate game. You can't win the Olympics, get your medal, and then the next time say, no, they don't get a medal yet, they've got to win 2 out of 3. That's not how that works. Imagine what would have happened if the story had the guts to actually give the Toymaker a prize, and something meaningful came out of the Doctor's mistake. Maybe the Toymaker would have captured Donna, and 14 would have needed Mel for support. Maybe the Toymaker would have claimed that the Doctor be banished forever, and so Donna gathers her family, Mel and Kate included, to play a game together to get the Doctor back. As it is, they play a game of luck, and it's an arbitrary outcome, and nothing happens because of it. This is why it matters. And clear problems and clear opportunities allow the audience to engage and play along as the characters try to use their opportunities to solve problems, and we learn things from how they solve their problems. The more meaningful the action and risk, the more meaningful their sacrifices and choice, the more meaningful they are changed, positively or negatively, by the result. True narrative consequences lead to more meaningful problems and opportunities, and ultimately says something about the changes the character went through. Here, 14 does but all and refuses to sacrifice and wins anyway. Closing thoughts. No rules and no foundations equals a fluff piece with a muddled message. The Giggle is a hard episode to get a grasp on because what it implies it's doing for most of its run is just light entertainment, and that's okay on its own. It's not what it ends up doing. If you compare the opening and the ending, it feels like 2 completely different episodes that just happen to overlap in the middle, and it's not like they smoothly transition from one to the other. As a trilogy, it seems intent to be purely episodic, until it decides it needs an overarching story, and the Giggle itself is intent on doing energetic escapism, until it scraps that and decides it's actually a therapeutic trauma story. I don't know what to make of that. I feel punished for thinking about it, because when 14 retires, all I can think about is how nonsense the journey was that got us there. Like, how much nonsense you had to pull for that to even be possible. When you take multiple shortcuts to achieve your ends don't feel fair. The ending is built on a house of cards. They want us to care with investment, but they want us to shrug off the lack of foundations. It's an open disregard for consequences and character development, yet wants to pretend that's exactly what it did. It's not boring, it just didn't earn its resolution. At its core, I'm really catching on that Doctor Who was more often than not probably always like this. I mean, it's always been hit and miss, and I like to say I've been in it because every season had at least one incredible banger in it, and with only 3 episodes, I'm sure most people would argue that was the second episode, and it still fell sort of flat for me. So with only 3 episodes, it's quite difficult to say this season had that one great episode that makes it all worth it. And maybe it's my fault for just having too high expectations, but at least I'm learning why my expectations weren't met. And you would think after 60 years with a returning veteran showrunner, the resolution didn't make sense, shouldn't be the easy go-to issue. Doctor Who can be a goofy show, but that doesn't mean it needs to be an emotionally cheap one. And I think the main reason I was excited was because when I think of Davies, I think of those grounded emotional beats that were really built to, and I don't see that here. Every special just happens however the writer likes, with no reason or rhyme or consequence or risk, and I feel like we shouldn't be noticing major issues 3 episodes in.
While most episodes of Doctor Who end with some kind of sci-fi solution, the best ones usually build upon something well established within their same episode. Then again, they also usually have more episodes a season to build something a little more anticipated and overarching. So there are stepping stones here, and only 3 episodes might be why it feels thin compared to what it usually is. 3 episodes and a lot of hand waves was probably a mistake. For me, this was a fun experiment when it was airing, but I was hoping to try out my writing theory on some really good episodes that I could also post in real time, and using these Doctor Who specials to demonstrate a good story did not match up. These fall very much into the average type of episode, better than we were before, but very let down by flimsy plotting and character development. There's some decent stuff here emotionally, but it's just not nearly the slam dunk I was hoping for, because the story craft, especially in its climaxes, isn't quite there. Filmmaking wise, amazing. I want to nitpick the way the ball game was shot, but I'm purely analysing the story beats. This was very exhausting, and I feel like all I learned is how much Davies prefers to skip over logic for the sake of style and spectacle, and I kind of wish that wasn't my takeaway. Maybe this trilogy holds up fine enough if you watch all 3 episodes back to back, and I do acknowledge that any season of Doctor Who plays a lot better when I just stream the whole season and don't stop to nitpick the logic of it, but I feel like it would still improve it, only in that I'd have less days in between and easier time to ignore the smaller things. But all roads end to the Toymaker getting unceremoniously defeated and Gatler appearing out of nowhere. For the most part, the design philosophy seems to be just make cool visual stuff happen, and that will wear thin quickly. It already has for me, but I watch each of these 3 times for research, and their rewatchability was actually okay. It does a decent job at it until it blatantly makes up its own rules and forgets what it's focused on. The consistency of those flaws really exhausted me, and while I enjoy Special 4 as well as a one-off Christmas special, I suspect too it's the kind of episode that's better left watched once and forgotten. I'm not invested enough anymore to try and make a fine-tooth comb out of it. I think I'm actually going to have a lot better experience if I treat it as pure light entertainment and only do an overarching was it worth watching once it's done with. And in that case, I'm sure it will be worth watching because Doctor Who is inherently fun. But I know at a glance that Special 4 as well is decent but shallow, and I won't have much more to say there that you can't infer from these 3 episodes. There really wasn't enough meat on the bones per episode to make it worth a deep dive, but I study storytelling and this was actually a fun experiment for what it was. It's a good demonstration of how to do entertainment. If you just want some fun spectacle to pass the time, I don't mind them when I watch them, but when it comes to storycraft, they missed opportunities for development that are increasingly frustrating. While it may be easy for me to catch in hindsight, a lot of them are caused just by flippantly ignoring cause and effect when there's no need to. If you want to do bioregeneration because you think it's more interesting, prove it, earn it, blend it into your story properly. When elements are set up properly, all it does is improve your story. No one has ever thought, wow, I really like how layered and developed this story is, but gee, I wish something would just happen out of nowhere so I can't be sure what matters and be randomly reversed. Like, for the most part, these episodes are full of good drama and potential, and yet somehow they always get to the climax and abruptly scrap the threat and fix it with something that was never properly set up. But I'm finished. I'm done. I do think going forward, I'm going to treat Doctor Who as a piece of light entertainment and not as a philosophically deep storytelling piece. The episodes I love do those well, but they are in hindsight a dime a dozen, and so maybe I'll save the fine-tooth combs for when those occur, and the rest of the time I will treat them as a did I enjoy them, and even in the case of these 3 episodes, yeah, they're enjoyable enough. I managed to watch them 3 times each, and they bugged me for these reasons, but they bugged me for mechanical reasons, not for entertainment reasons. I got all 3 Tennant specials done, so I'm done. Gatler is doing a good job. I want to emphasize that all 4 episodes are fun. I enjoyed episode 4 enough, But all 4 episodes come with the asterisk of as long as I only watch it once and don't have to think about it, which is disappointing if I want this era to have any longevity. I'll do a video on it if I feel an episode becomes so good that I can really demonstrate something in contrast to these, but for now, this is my deep dive into the construction of all 3 Tennant 60th specials. They're okay, I guess. Harmless, really, but irritating if held up to any scrutiny. They're not boring, but I feel like with some thought and care towards cause and effect, I challenge them to really build towards their payoffs. And I challenge you to leave a comment below, because doing this trial and error without any feedback is so hard. I completely understand if anyone thinks I'm nitpicking or is going too hard at it, but the point of a deep dive, the point of a fine-tooth comb, is to really dig into those weeds. And I do insist that the good stories will hold up when you do so. I also understand that watching me read a script isn't very interesting, but between improvising it and making sure my points are well thought out, it's worth the practice, and I'd much rather make sure my thoughts are coherent and clear than winged when this is such a long and comprehensive, specific take. Hopefully if you've made it this far, it's because you think I have a point or two worth hearing, and thank you. I'm going to assume you don't know who I am and you just really love Doctor Who, and believe me, so do I. Thank you. Hello. So finishing the 3 Doctor Who reviews and sitting on whether to do the 4th one, but having this absolute gut feeling that it's a Christmas episode, and those are already usually quite thin, and it really feels like not special 4 of the specials, but episode 0 of the season we're about to get but haven't yet got. It's really got me thinking how I hold special 4 to a completely different standard. And then it got me thinking about how I like Power Rangers, I like Thunderbirds, I like a lot of kid show stuff that I genuinely think is quite good. Like, Thunderbirds really knows tension. Avatar: The Last Airbender proves cartoons are not just for kids. I mean, plenty of anime does, but, you know. But Power Rangers to me became like quite the comparison to Doctor Who. They're both shows in which they have a multi-year legacy of rotating cast. They both fight aliens, albeit the Power Rangers fight them with weapons and the Doctor fights them without weapons. But they're both long-running series that, like, as geek culture, we take quite seriously, but also understand that they are campy shows for kids. So it really got me thinking on why I go so hard at Doctor Who, whereas something like Power Rangers, it can be as campy as it wants, and I'll still have, like, criticisms. Megaforce is one of the worst seasons. Probably not the worst, given Operation Overdrive, but like at the end of the day, I give Power Rangers a lot more leeway than I do Doctor Who, and I think it's because Power Rangers being a colourful spandex show with rubber Japanese aliens, it just lends itself to, like, the aesthetic itself is inherently more silly. So you look at Power Rangers from a distance and go, yeah, it's absurd, but oh well, it's Power Rangers. And so when it comes to, it's just for kids, Power Rangers kind of gets away with that a bit more. Whereas Doctor Who are genuinely, like, the monsters are still that same kind of campiness, but with the new budget, like, my brain almost forgets that. So and even in the way Doctor Who tells stories, the fact that it's about one person with multiple incarnations, and that they fight aliens with their wit and their voice and their smarts, and then even when they die, they endure, there's some philosophy in that. Whereas Power Rangers is known for, and then they learned the power of friendship. Like, Doctor Who has that,
but its best episodes don't fall on that. Doctor Who is the kind of show where it is generally hit and miss, but at its best, it never has to rely on, well, it's for kids, well, it's just silly and campy, well, don't take it too seriously. But there's really something to that. There are so many other kid shows, like Hey Arnold is a good example. It's very clearly got themes that are directed towards kids, but they're very mature themes for a kid show. And I think to some extent, when Power Rangers does a generally episodic, one of them learns that being competitive is bad and teamwork is always better. That's the kind of thing that I just go, yep, it's thin, shallow, and obvious, but it's still solid. It's still a solid story structure. Whereas something about these three specials just really got to me on a level of they just bypassed the basic payoff stuff. Whereas episode 4, when I think about taking that same deep dive structure to it, I just end up feeling like, but it's a Christmas episode. Like I shrug it off just on the very low standards nature of it. So there is something to how I give Power Rangers a big pass for being campy. And so when it comes to Doctor Who, I'm not against silliness and whimsy and whatnot. Doctor Who thrives on it. But Doctor Who wants to do those philosophical, traumatic bits and then doesn't fully commit. And even doing this to figure out what I'm trying to figure out here, it feels like in either direction I'm either going to inadvertently say that, well, see, this is why Power Rangers is better, or this is why Doctor Who is better. It's not really that. It's understanding that I hold Doctor Who on a completely different pedestal than I do Power Rangers. When at the end of the day, they are just a show that thrives on these crossovers and the individual episodic episodes where they go darker than you expected them to. And so I really think now, going forward, I will take the approach of deep dive. If I hit an episode that I think would actually benefit from a closer look at it, but it takes so much energy to create an hour-long video to bring energy to something that didn't bring it in return, that it's actually kind of better to take that same approach I have to Power Rangers, which is, was it worth watching? Which also, there's probably some benefit in when I watch Power Rangers, I'm watching the season as a whole. I'm not watching one episode at a time, where I have to sit on a thin filler episode for a week and decide whether there's anything more to it than, yay, I watched it, anyway, do other things now. Because it feels kind of sad to do that to Doctor Who. To watch it once, go, yeah, it was good, and then move on, and that be it. That doesn't, when the show really wants to get back to its heyday, when it wants to be a big budget show, when it wants to be the new big Disney thing, like, I remember when Power Rangers was bought by Disney. Like, Power Rangers actually went through this. They were bought by Disney for a while. They brought back their most popular Ranger in the same way they've brought back David Tennant. And in that same vein, they have these crossovers where the same Rangers keep coming back to the point where both fandoms have this nature of thinking that the most popular one is also the most overrated one, just because they're so commonly chosen and there's such a vast range of characters to choose from, even if the Doctors are all the Doctor. So it's just got me thinking about how I treat Power Rangers versus how I treat Doctor Who. So I don't know if it's that I should drop standard when it comes to Doctor Who and just enjoy it for what it is, or if this is actually a notion that, because the best seasons of Power Rangers probably do hold up to a deep dive like that. Like, Power Rangers in Space has some really good stories to it. But I think for now, going with the 4th special, asking, was it worth watching, is a good baseline. And if I'm like, yeah, it was worth watching to the point where I want to dig deeper into it, then I should do a deep dive. Starting with the deep dive for every episode is going to burn out so fast. So yeah, let's go with that. Episode 1, The Star Beast. Yeah, worth watching, because the Star Beast itself is so lively, and David Tennant just brings it, and that alone makes it enjoyable. Episode 2, same deal again. It really is David Tennant, because having him also play a villain, just, that's a solid move. And then thinking about that, again, David Tennant and his absolute off-the-wall energy combined with Neil Patrick Harris's performance. When I think about it, all 3 episodes, at their very least, have a solid protagonist energy and a solid antagonist energy. And all the shenanigans that happen around it are just David Tennant being let loose. And Catherine Tate having a good interaction with him while he does so. At the end of the day, their banter and their dialogue always makes it worth it. So then, looking at Special 4, and you'd think, well, but David Tennant's not in that. Good. That's why, when it comes to Doctor Who, as much as I get why they don't want to overuse the crossover thing, like Power Rangers and Doctor Who having this legacy of like this many Rangers, this many Doctors, the crossover is something that they them can do that not many other shows can do. So it's funny that they want to be the MCU, but they don't want to do crossovers. That's an odd choice. So then Special 4, was it worth watching? Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, Doctor Who, just by its own nature of existing, is a good opportunity to watch with other people. And on top of that, Gatwa's performance is really good as well. Gatwa jumping between the excitement of learning rope and the tearfulness nature of remembering that he's an orphan as well. If I do a deep dive, I'm gonna just go into complaints because the fact that they spent 3 episodes building up to Tennant retiring, and then Gatwa instantly mentions the being an orphan. Like, again, he didn't necessarily have to get over the whole thing, but it's like he never did. You could literally just skip from the end of Whittaker to Gatwa, and that plotline would still make complete sense. So, as a Christmas special introducing Gatwa and Millie, great. I think it's blatantly obvious, Red Dwarf style, that Ruby is probably her own grandmother or something. But yeah, like, we'll see. This is why I treat it as episode 0 of the next season. It kind of feels like here's an incomplete introductory episode, and you can't quite really, on its own, it is an introductory episode that feels like a Christmas filler, and that is both good and bad. Like, it's solid, but it's not really anything to go on until we see the rest of it. I do get the sense that the Christmas episode will be vastly improved or vastly devolved by what comes after. So yeah, despite all my complaints, all 4 specials were definitely worth watching, but maybe not worth... As soon as you dig, they fall apart. They're definitely held up by energetic performance. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.